I was up at 6, showered, and dressed to meet Julia for breakfast. She seemed to be under the weather or a little sickly today. She seemed a little irritable about life in general. Knowing that women can get moody, I let it go and advised her that I was going to see Dr. Morgan to get some questions answered this morning. We said our goodbyes, and I didn't try to be familiar with her because she was being standoffish. I was standing at his door when he came whistling down the hall in his ever-present good mood. "Good morning, Bernie. Is it time for a chat? Let me put some coffee on, and we'll have a powwow." He handed me the coffee pot and told me to run down to the men's room and fill it while he got the coffee grounds in the basket. I was there and back with the full pot as he was sliding the basket into the Mr. Coffee. He sat at his desk and waved toward the chairs in front of his desk. I handed him the completed work and test from the end of chapters for his second semester course, and then said, "I'm going to finish all my second semester work pretty soon and should finish with decent grades. I think everyone will be satisfied with my progress. My question is that should I be choosing a course of study since I'll be beginning my third semester? You know that my education goal is to become a lawyer. I've looked everywhere for class listings for potential lawyers, and there aren't any. Some schools have a pre-law schedule, but Mizzou doesn't. I need to know what classes I'll need and what degree I should work toward." Jonathan nodded and said, "You do ask a serious question, and I have to answer that I don't know. Let me call over to the law school and talk to a professor there who I've known for a long time. She doesn't get along with men all that well, but she'll like you because you're quiet and unassuming." He called a number and said, "Good morning, Denise. How is the most beautiful professor in law school?" The woman's voice was very piercing, and I could plainly hear her although I wasn't near the receiver. "You're so full of shit, Jonathan. What do you need? A lawyer to get you out of a paternity suit?" "Not this time, Denise. I'll try to up my rate of seduction so that we can get together more often. No, I have a young man who wants to become an attorney in front of me this time. He's in one of my experiments and learning programs and is rapidly progressing. He wants to know what courses he should take during his third semester and beyond that will assist him in law school. He's discovered that there isn't a course of study for pre-law and is looking for guidance." She asked the question that had Jonathan smiling. "Is he courteous? Do you think I can get along with him?" Jonathan said, "You would be the perfect counselor for him. I'm going to remain his undergraduate counselor, and you can guide him through law school. He's moving fast as he only entered school this semester and is already over halfway through his second semester. Grunter's son even likes him, so you know that the kid is likable." The voice said, "Send him over here. I don't have any classes this morning, and you know that I hate to have coffee by myself. What's his name so I can look him up?" "Bernard Beck, and it should note that all his associates call him Bernie. You'll like him. Send him." She hung up with a clunk. I asked, "Does she speak that loud when she's talking one-on-one?" "She has a very piercing voice. You'll get used to it." Now for some advice. Denise Ponders is an extremely attractive woman. However, she doesn't care for men and doesn't date them at all. You could have a really good time with her if you were a sweet-looking young lady. She and I have established a good relationship and have even gone to functions together. We had too much ale at the ale house a couple of times, and I've made sure that she was home safe, so she trusts me. Go see her and enjoy having a relationship with an extremely knowledgeable woman. She'll be good for you." I didn't get any of his fresh coffee, but I was on the way to a promised cup with Denise Ponders. I wondered if she was a PhD, or even if there was a law PhD. She would almost have to have passed the bar and know the law to be teaching. I wondered why becoming a lawyer was so ambiguous. It was almost as if you could pass the LSAT with a high score and not even need a degree if your other qualifications were good. Jonathan had drawn me a map, and I arrived at her office in less than 10 minutes after she hung up. Her door had her name along with JD. Under that was printed in smaller letters was Doctor of Jurisprudence. I was about to knock when that piercing voice said, "I see you lurking out there. Come in if you're going to talk to me." I know. You were reading my name and about my being a doctor of jurisprudence." "Yes, sir. I can put your educational wounds back together. How do you want your coffee? Bring me a donut or pastry the next time you come to see me. They aren't on my diet, but it's okay if someone else brings it, and I'll eat it to show that I'm not being ungrateful." She poured me coffee in a foam cup and turned. "Well, sit down for crying out loud. I hope we can have a conversation and not just a wham, bam. Thank you, ma'am." I cracked a smile and then broke into a laugh. "Thank you for making me feel at ease. I needed something to lighten up the load this morning. Tell me all about it. What are you wondering about?" "I want to be a lawyer, and I generally know what I need to do to get there, but I don't know the correct path. I don't know what course of study I should follow or what undergraduate classes to take. I'm going to try to push through the undergraduate work and study as hard and fast as I can. I'm going to need some experience, and I want to work with the county attorney and the local lawyer back home for the experience I'll need. I need guidance to know what degree I should study for and to be pointed to where I might get some of the experience I'm going to need." Denise said, "You're right. We don't publish any specific course of study that potential law students should follow. My suggestions would probably be a business degree as a major with a sociology or psychology minor. You'll want to take a logic class as an elective, which means that you might even choose a minor in mathematics if you're good in math. That's always good to get your head working when you're up against a brick wall. Does any of that help? The woman seemed to enjoy discussing this topic and said, "Here, bring the chair around and sit next to me. We'll go through the courses needed for a couple of degrees." We began with sociology and went through them, and then psychology, which really looked boring. I told Dr. Ponders, they need to combine sociology and psychology for a degree as it could be interesting to understand both sides. She looked at me funny and said, "That's very observant of you. Have you looked at what was in these courses before?" "No, ma'am, but I read as much as I could about the various types of knowledge areas that I could. High schools don't have a lot of reference material on degrees like that. Our county library didn't have that much on them either. I used the computer at the library and they didn't have a lot of information from any of the major universities, even this one. We looked at a math degree and it was exciting to me, but it didn't have anything to help me in law school. I saw a couple of classes I was going to look up to see if Grunderson taught them. I could always use them as electives." She brought up the English department and I liked a lot of it, but not the English literature classes. I like to read and can even almost recite a couple of Shakespeare books, but a lot of the supposedly great books are so boring that they're a struggle to read and comprehend. I remember reading Gulliver's Travels in grade school and was bored to tears. A new high school teacher had us read it again, and it was still like watching paint dry. I thought Mutiny on the Bounty was really good because it dealt with all the crew members' emotions. She said, "There is one class that you can take that will give you insight on what the law is about. It's this 3-level class, that is the psychology of 18th century law. This will give you a lot to think about when you consider our country was still being put together and how the court system we had then was trying to make decisions that were fair and just. A lot of court cases today still reference the decisions from back then. You'll also want to take the class because I teach it. I'm a tyrant like Grunderson and some of the other professors, but my goal is to teach you and yours is to learn. It's really an interesting class." I said, "The psychology program has a lot of sociology classes and a greater portion of English classes than sociology. I'm not keen on anthropology, but I suppose I'll have to take some classes I don't like. You've helped a lot, so now I'll have to find out how to register for the next semester and visit with the professors to see if they might let me progress at my own speed the way I have so far. I'd like to get through my 3rd and 4th semesters before I have to attend every lecture to know the course material. My reading comprehension is good, and I retain knowledge well. I did 22 hours the first semester, and I'm doing 20 this second semester. I should be just about done with the boring required stuff." I took the midterm with the class for Dr. Morgan. Although I was through with the class and had passed the final he privately administered to me. It was almost too easy. Grunderson gave me a second midterm, and then a second final for freshman algebra. He was aggravated because I didn't show my work. I didn't use any scratch paper as every problem he gave me was so easy that I could do it in my head. I think our math teacher in our high school is better than a lot of the other teachers in the state. Denise asked, "Did your school have class standings when you graduated?" "Yes, ma'am. I was second behind Charlene Cream. She was coming here on a scholarship, but she was pregnant when she graduated and decided to get married and stay home to take care of her baby. That's country folks for you. Their priorities are different. We did have one of our baseball players go to the Cardinals in the first round of the draft. He's a pitcher who is going to be good in the majors one day. He could have gone to college for free, but his family just didn't have the money to buy books and stuff. He's doing well in the baseball farm system and is playing winter ball down in Puerto Rico." Denise said, "I'd ask you out for a drink, but I doubt you're old enough. Do you have a friend you're sweet on?" This surprised me because Jonathan thinks she might be a lesbian or gay. I didn't want to ask her, but she could guide me on suing Scott McKinley Jr. You could probably direct me to a local lawyer. I have a situation that I could use some assistance with." Denise said, "Tell me about it." I was assigned a room with a man who was a little full of himself when the semester first started. He didn't have a roommate the first semester, so he was used to spreading out and thought he could continue to do it even though I was going to be in the room. I asked him to put his stuff away and he became angry. Denise said, "Scott McKinley Jr., he was in trouble a few times his first semester, and the university used our school to defend the boy and get him off the civil charges that were against him. He's supposed to become one of the great quarterbacks that come from Mizzou. So you think you can sue him for what? Did he beat you up?" "No, ma'am. He tried to kill me with the chief of police there with me. He had attacked me before that, but I pushed him away each time he attacked. The police used a ruse to get me to leave with them, and I ended up being locked up in a holding cell without food until the next afternoon. There's more to the story at the police station, but the important part was that we found the room totally destroyed when the chief of police took me back to my room. All my clothes were ripped and cut. Even my dress shoes were sliced open. All my books were torn in half and cut up. My bed had been urinated on, and there was human excrement spread all over the bed and pillow. He even trashed an old radio I used to relax with. Scott McKinley Sr. gave me money to replace my clothes and books, but I didn't sign anything. I'm still recovering financially from that episode, and I think he needs to pay me some money to make sure I get through law school. Denise said, I'd love to take your case, but the school may not like that I would assist a plaintiff against their golden boy. I told her, he may not be their golden boy any longer. He has been suspended at this point because he's in his jail for attempted murder. The chief won't drop those charges. The woman sat back with a big grin. She said, that a-hole was extremely aggressive feeling me up at a faculty meeting with the sports kids. I mentioned it to Jonathan, who said that he would make sure I made it home without problems. It was still very unsettling to have someone do that in front of so many. Well, he probably won't be bullying and being a problem to women here at the university. I can see that the school might not be able to represent me. So can you recommend an attorney? Denise held a finger up for me to pause while she picked her phone up and dialed a number. Hi, Shauna. How would you like an easy lawsuit that you can afford to do for 20 or 25%? There was a pause before Denise said, this is a nice guy who makes me want to change stripes. Listen to his story and you'll know what I'm talking about. The suit will in all likelihood be almost instantly settled without a lot of effort. There was another pause. Then Denise said, I'll send him right over if you're free. Pause. Good. He'll be on his way. Denise hung up and said, take any statements written up or an inventory of what was destroyed that you may have and go see Shauna Marconi. She has a little two-room office in the First National Bank building. There will be parking at the curb in front if you're lucky. Take some quarters and put 4 in for 2 hours. That should take care of it. Thank you for all your help, Denise. I appreciate the time you spent with me. The woman said, it was my pleasure, but we're not done. You have to come back and let me help you register for your next semester. I need to fulfill some university good deeds. I left and walked fast back to the dorm, checked my appearance, and decided that I still looked pressed and neat. I grabbed my file of everything from the incident and went to my truck. Columbia, Missouri isn't very big, so it wasn't far from the university to the old downtown area. I parked right in front of the bank and put 4 quarters in for 2 hours. It was easy to find Shauna Marconi's office, as it was just off the old slow elevator. A cute blonde came from the rear office with her hand stuck out. She said, Bernie Beck? I'm Shauna Marconi, Denise's friend. Come in, and we'll get right down to business. I came in as she grabbed a legal pad with a couple of pencils and said, sit with me at the conference table. We'll be more comfortable. I smiled and laid the files on the table. I had some of the police photographs that included the room after it was destroyed. There was a picture of the fire extinguisher and a picture of the large buck knife. I gave her a copy of the complete statement I had written and typed up later. I told her that the police had the original handwritten statement. I had written up another statement about how I was treated at the police station and was eventually rescued by the chief, who helped me recover most of the money that had been taken. That officer still owed me $26 as far as I was concerned. I wonder if he was the one who kept my watch. I had included their names in my statement, but they might not be policemen any longer. There was one more statement that told of my meeting Scott McKinley Sr. at the police station for him to give me some money to buy some clothes and another set of books. I told her the exact amount I received, but not what I spent. Shauna was a quick study and very quickly read everything. She said, can I have all this? Do you have copies? I don't have copies of the photos, but I have all the statements in my computer. Keep it and use it if all this will assist you to get this done quickly. Shauna said, I'll get everything printed up, file a lawsuit, and have Scott Jr. served in jail. I'm sure his lawyer will call me after the kid is served tomorrow. I'd bet the kid has a bunch of trust accounts that will cover anything you would deserve. A jury would give you a bunch extra, but you'll be done, and I get some fees for very little effort if you get a good settlement that you ask for. Here, I made up my standard agreement that you owe me nothing unless you collect. I'll settle for 20% of this one because it's going to be fast. I read and signed the contract. Shauna stood and said, now let me act like a lawyer and get this suit filed while the clerk's office is still open. I want to get this served as fast as possible. I hadn't been in the office for a full hour, so there was an hour left on the meter, but they don't give refunds. I went straight back to the campus and went to the cafeteria. This had been a busy morning. Julia came in with a sour look on her face. She went through the line and turned to look for a table. I was easy to see by the windows. She saw me and softened up a little and came my way. She put her tray on the table and took her coat off. She told me, I'm sorry for being in such a bad mood, but I found out something that really pisses me off early this morning. My brother has been able to break into our individual trusts from our parents. My trust from Dad is still secure, as is my trust from grandmother, but the big trust from our folks is just about drained. I called Dad, and he said he couldn't help me right now because he may have to help pay for Scotty's lawyers. He said that I should have been more observant. I told him that I wanted an accounting and should probably have him jailed for helping Scott fraudulently steal my trust fund. I also told Dad that I would own a car dealership real fast if I found out that he helped Scotty get into my trust. The upset woman said, I want to go down to the jail and see Scotty this afternoon. I want to know where my money is. Would you drive me? I'm too mad to drive. It shouldn't take long, and I won't tell Scott that you brought me. We ate quickly and then walked to the student parking lot. I drove to the jail that was near the main sheriff's office. City prisoners were kept there as well. Julia gave me her purse to keep after showing her ID and was led back to the visitor phones. She had asked that her conversation be recorded and paid the fee to get a copy of the recording. She came back within 20 minutes with a cat that got the canary grin. She had a CD and a receipt for a transcription that would be ready tomorrow. Let's get to the truck, and then I'll tell you what went on. We can go to your room and listen to this on your PC. I want to copy this a couple of times so that my aunts, Dad, and Gamma can hear this. You should have heard him yelling in there. He said you sued him, and a process server just left a copy of the suit. He said he was going to need all the money from both of our accounts for his lawyers, and that Dad was keeping it for him. Do you want a car dealership? Gamma says that her lawyer and accountant watch the car dealership closely because she doesn't trust Dad's accounting. Now's the best part. He was telling me how they were going to grant bail, and he said the first thing he was going to do was to find you and kill you. He said that about 3 times, and it is all recorded. I doubt he'll be given bail. Can we stop by the police station and advise the police chief? And then I want to see a lawyer, but I might not be able to use the family people. I said, I have just the person. You'll like her, but I better be with you or she's going to take one look at you and try to steal you away. What kind of people do you know, Bernie? Is this woman safe? She's fine, just enthusiastic and comes highly recommended. We went to the chief of police's office and he welcomed us in. The first thing he did was open his drawer and hand me an envelope. He said, your other $26, your watch, and a letter of apology are there. The man needs the job, and I'm sure that you're a generous person so that this man can keep his job and feed his family. I don't think he will ever step out of line again. Julia told the police chief about her visit and said she would give him a copy of the recording and transcript. He said, you don't have to copy me since they save those visits. I'll get a copy and use it for his bail hearing. Threats like that make him a keeper. We drove to the bank and rode the elevator to Shauna's office. Julia said, I think Jill went to school with Shauna when she saw the name. I'll know as soon as I see her. The door was unlocked, so we went in and Shauna saw us enter. Back already? You didn't change your mind, did you? Hell, his lawyer was just on the phone with me, telling me that they would agree and have a check and settlement papers here in the morning. That'll be the fastest settlement I've ever had or even heard of. You're going to be fixed for law school, especially if you can be admitted here. That's all good news, Shauna, but I've brought you another client. Meet Julia McKinley, sister of the miscreant you just sued. Shauna's eyes dilated and her mouth began looking like a fish's mouth. The very pretty lawyer said, I know you. You're Jill's niece who she used to brag about all the time. Tell me your problem. It took long enough to tell the whole story that I went down and put more money in the meter to stay another 2 hours, although they didn't charge you for being there after 5. I went back upstairs and Shauna was holding Julia's hand. The two were talking about Jill. Julia moved her hand that was under the table to my thigh after I sat back down. She smiled at me and said, do you know that the woman who sent you to Shauna wanted to take you out and cougar you? She told Shauna that she would probably want to do the same after she met you. I've just told her that you're a very loyal guy, and we've just begun a relationship. I also told her that I'd bet Jill would be right there in line, and that they should wait for us to get used to each other in case I might dole out samples. I know that I was very red, as both women were grinning at me. I had no idea that women were so open and aggressive. Julia asked Shauna, can I use your phone? I need to call grandmother. I'm sure you remember her. She's still kicking and as vibrant as she's always been. We heard this side of the conversation. Julia said, I want to come see you this evening, Gamma. We can even take you out to supper if you want. After a pause. Oh, that would be too much, Gamma. We can do it that way if you really want to. Make sure Cora and James don't get mad at us for being late arrivals. We need to go by Bernie's dorm for a minute, and then we'll be there. We drove to my dorm to make 6 copies of the CD and store the original one in a shoebox in the closet. We drove to Grandmother McKinley's home, and were let in by James in his formal wear. I asked him, how come the formal suit? As we put our coats in a closet, James smiled and said, if Julia wants me to serve her breakfast in my finery, that's what she gets. She said that she wanted to let young Julia feel special tonight. Grandmother didn't want to hear anything until we ate a delicious supper of pork chops, green beans, and boiled potatoes. Cora, the cook, had made some delicious rolls that were wonderful with butter. The difference with this formal dinner was that both Cora and James sat and ate with us. It seemed only natural for Julia and me to help clear the table and help Cora with the dishes, pots, and pans in the kitchen. It didn't take but a few minutes to have everything in the dishwasher. We went into the sitting room and were surprised to see Jill and June with grandmother. Julia asked, "Why did you guys come over when I said that I needed to talk to Gamma privately?" Grandmother McKinley said, "I think what you want to share with us affects these two as well as you. I've had my accountant go on a witch hunt to find out a few things and was very surprised. You two tell me what you have, and I'll share what I know." Julia told the three what she had discovered and what her dad had told her. She told us that she wasn't that concerned over how much the trust had been worth, but was angry that it was stolen from her by her own brother. She said that she would have given him the money if he needed it, but he didn't even ask and just manipulated the accounts to steal it. She then said they had to listen to her confrontation with Scotty. 20 minutes later, grandmother said, "I will make sure that young man doesn't see freedom for at least 20 years. He may have the company of his father if this continues." She told the two aunts and Julia, "Your sister and her husband left you a sizable trust, and an even larger one for Scotty and Julia. When my accountant discovered there could be irregularities in the trust disbursement, he filed to stop those and tried to recover what had been taken. Your entire trust has been recovered and placed into a special account governed by my accountants, the same as your trust from your father and from me. You've never asked for any disbursements from any of your trusts and have provided your personal spending money through part-time jobs. I prevented the accounts for the two aunts from being broken into. I wanted to make sure all the children's accounts were protected. I'll have the prosecuting attorney add those charges to Scotty's sentencing, but most importantly, we must make sure that he isn't allowed out on bail. I'm afraid he could go on a rampage and do harm to more than just Bernie." The woman I had so much respect for said, "You two sisters of Julia's father and Scotty need to make a decision. Your husbands are good fathers and good providers. Do you think they could run an automobile dealership? I'm going to own one very soon, and I want it to remain in the family. McKinley Chevrolet and Cadillac has been in business for 75 years, and I'd love to know it could be in business for another 75. These two young people are just learning about life and shouldn't be saddled with the responsibility of running a business like that. They might want to be a part of the business in the future, but not right now. What are your first thoughts about this, June and Jill?" June was sitting stone-faced, not knowing what to say. Jill had a smile on her face and said, "I bet we two ladies could run the business, but it would be even better if our partners and husbands were in charge. We can be the welcoming women, and they can direct the salespeople and close the sales." June came alive and asked, "Does that mean I can get that hot pink Corvette I've always wanted?" Jill punched her sister on the shoulder and said, "Only if you sell enough other cars and trucks to justify you having something like that as a personal ride. Too bad we no longer have Corvairs, or you could have one of those." That caused a lot of laughter. The meeting broke down into a lot of jabs and comments until grandmother said, "All right, girls. I want you to keep your men home tomorrow so that we can all discuss this with them. They've been working at the dealership for several years and know what needs to be done. Get together with each other, and then come talk to me. I own 80% of the dealership and have my accountants watching the place. You will each be given 30% of the dealership if we do this, and I'll still retain enough to be able to help out if you need it. Don't need my help and sell a lot of cars so that you can give me a lot of money in dividends." The two aunts were looking at each other, knowing that this was a special deal for them. They both stood and said goodnight after hugging and kissing everyone. Julia asked, "Why did you do all this tonight instead of waiting for some of this to wash out from the legal stuff?" When we were alone with grandmother, grandmother said, "It's easy, if you think about it. Your father could figure on trying to abscond with as much cash as possible, along with some assets, if I take the business over. I'll have him by the balls and can get him out of there before he can take anything by being faster than he already is. I've made arrangements for all security codes to be changed and any of the women he's been having a relationship with immediately be terminated. Mrs. Wilson, the company accountant, has been very observant and knows where Scott has kept the money he's skimmed for the last several years for just this situation. Some special safecrackers are there opening his hidden safe as we speak, and will place everything in there in a container and deliver it here. I want you two to stay here tonight, so that we're sure we have everything that Scott was going to use to run. You won't be there if someone were to go and break into your room, Bernie. I don't know what Scott will do with everything that's happened." Julia looked at me and softly said, "Please, Bernie. Gamma is protecting us." James came in and said, "The special people you asked for are here to watch the house. I think we're safe from anyone trying to come in." Cora came in with 3 glasses and the earthen jug. She poured each of us half a glass of this special liquor, and then said, "The maker of your special liquor brought you a 5-gallon milk can of what he says is some of his best. I've taken the liberty to pour you some of this tonight. James and I will have some in the kitchen." Mrs. Julia McKinley smiled at us and said, "Don't you just love to have special people to look after you? You know that you two should consider moving in here with me. You could still eat at the cafeteria if you wanted to, but you would be able to have the run of this house to live in and have fun. I know the two of you are not ready to fully commit, but I think you're ready to join in living with me for the rest of your college life. I'd like that. Cora showed us upstairs where the extra bedrooms were and put us in a suite at the end of the hall. She told us, no one wakes up much before 7, and Julia and James both are hard of hearing, so have as much fun as you want. Julia was almost embarrassed. Like I said, almost. We went to bed naked, but Julia kept her panties on. She had an extra pair washed and draped over the shower curtain in the bathroom. She told me, all this craziness has me starting a day early. I'll be out of action for 3 or 4 more days now. I want to make love to you to show and tell you how much you mean to me while all this craziness is going on. I hugged her to me, and she kissed all my available exposed skin. I told this special person, we're doing well together, and we'll continue to do so for a long time. Let's stay together and enjoy the ride while we watch how all this works out. I shouldn't give up my room because it will be too difficult to get it back if something happens to us. As she was leaning over kissing me, Julia said, I foresee nothing taking us from each other. I'm learning about business, and you're learning just about anything they'll teach you. It's right there if I want to run the dealership. You know that you could run that thing while I stayed home and raised babies. But no, you want to be a small-town lawyer in the sticks. Go down there and be who you have planned to be, and I'll build a home for us and your family to live in. We have money, Bernie. You're about to have more money than a lot of banks. The only thing I can tell you is to make sure that you read every word of any document they want you to sign. Take that sexy Shauna with you and make her read it all. She's a very smart, sexy person. We went to sleep hugging, totally wrapped around each other, with our lips just barely touching. The two of us woke at 6 and were ready to get going for the day. I told Julia that I didn't do one bit of studying yesterday and would need to catch up to stay with my plan. She said that she had classes she needed to attend and was ready to get back to it. We both dressed in what we had and agreed to talk about her grandmother's invitation to live there. It might be necessary if her father no longer had the income he was used to. He would instantly be in trouble with alimony for Julia's mother if he lost the dealership, even though she had family money that she could live on for an eternity. We went downstairs after straightening the room and found Cora having a cup of coffee with James. We joined them, and she gave us each a fresh piece of sticky pastry that she had just pulled from the oven. I asked for a glass of milk that Julia also wanted, and we were being treated like guests again. It was time for us to go to school, so we had to stop by the dorms so that Julia could get her books and notes for her classes, and I could get back to working on one of my subjects. The house phone rang, and James answered it. He motioned for Julia to come to the phone. Julia spoke quietly to whoever it was, and wrote something on the notepad next to the kitchen wall phone. She gave me the note when she hung up, and said, Jill had a call from Shauna. You don't have a phone, so she had to track you down and found out that I wasn't in the dorm, so she figured I was here. She said that you were to call Shauna at this number. Hi, Shauna, this is Bernie Beck. Jill found me through Julia. Shauna said, the attorneys for Scott McKinley Jr. want this resolved very fast. They will meet us at my office at 9 o'clock. Can you be there? Sure, Shauna. Do I need to bring anything? No, Bernie, just bring yourself. This won't be that fast, because we'll both have to read the settlement papers. Don't be angry, but I changed the settlement amount as per Julia's grandmother's recommendation after I reread all the information you gave me. It's quite a bit more than you asked for. Come downtown and be here by 9. I didn't know what could have been asked for that would make me mad, but my original request was for $100,000. That would or should be enough money for me to get through law school and help out at home if it was needed. Grandpa made enough from his personal best deliveries that the family always had enough to live on, and I knew that his bank account was very full. I had taken care of a lot of the farm business for a long while. We drove back to campus, and I let Julia out at her dorm. I parked in the 30-minute loading zone, ran in, showered, shaved, and put fresh pressed clothes on. I was back to the truck in 20 minutes and heading downtown. Shauna was smiling as I walked into her office. She had 2 legal pads with pencils out and told me, "You're here at exactly the right time. I have a fresh pot of coffee just finishing so that I can offer some to these people." I added a 0 onto the amount you gave me, Bernie. I know the McKinleys, and they have money coming out of their mattress. That Julia was taken advantage of, and the senior Mrs. McKinley was attempted to be harmed made me very angry. These people are bringing the money, so let's read the settlement and make sure that we understand all the wording. 4 men in identical dark suits, white shirts, and black ties entered the office, all carrying briefcases. It was like each of them came out of a copy machine. Shauna hadn't expected 4, but she was prepared as she brought up 2 more chairs that had been against the wall. One of the men was acting like he was in charge and brought out a stack of papers and a cashier's check. He said, "Our business will be complete if you'll just sign these, Mr. Beck." Before Shauna could say anything, I said, "My attorney and I would like to read the settlement agreement. You men may want to go have coffee, or maybe you haven't had breakfast yet. I may not be as fast a reader as Ms. Marconi." The man was almost flustered. "Well, you can just sign these so that we can conclude this." "No, sir. I can't just sign them without reading them. You can have some coffee and use the time to read over your notes if you want to stay." Shauna looked at me funny and said, "Let's get at it." I took one of the group of papers and began reading on page 1. I asked Shauna for a highlighter while reading page 5. The paragraph said that I was releasing Scott of any and all present and future liability he could incur. The same wording appeared on page 7. And then on page 11 it states I would give testimony favorable to him. There was a summary on page 15 that gave a list of all the demands he was making in order to give me the amount requested. From this day forward, I would now and forever not give testimony about what transpired in the dormitory on the specified dates. Shauna finished and showed me what she objected to, and our copies were marked about the same. She wanted some other language changed. I told the man who was acting as if in charge that I would sign if we agreed to line out all what I considered to be offending language. Otherwise, I was going to ask Ms. Marconi to proceed with obtaining a court date. All 4 men had red faces and were becoming agitated. I said, "It's not just that Scott trashed all my possessions that night and threatened to kill me. He then displayed a knife he was going to use in front of the sheriff and several other witnesses the next day, and then he declared that he was going to kill me again to his sister yesterday. We have that recorded. Change the language and I'll sign. Otherwise be prepared for how much a jury might consider." Shauna advised, "Well said. I don't want them to have these redone. I want 2 copies of this with the changes lined out and inserted. We're going to have other attorneys help us tear it apart again if they take it back and rewrite it. What is it going to be, gentlemen?" Shauna said that we should leave them for a few minutes to use the restroom and come back for their decision. Out in the hallway, Shauna said, "You have a good eye and can understand all that garbage they wrote. They don't need all that bullshit for a settlement agreement. They were trying to make you liable for other acts that could occur in the future. You settling will not free Scott Jr. There will be additional federal banking charges according to Julia's grandmother." We used the restrooms and went back to Shauna's office. The men were all sitting with stone faces. The leader said, "Mark out what you want to delete and insert any wording you want to add. Do it to a 3rd copy the same way, as we will need 3 copies." Shauna and I went through the settlement page by page again and lined out paragraphs and inserted the correct language where needed. My attorney told me to sign each page and to initial each change. The attorney sitting across from us initialed all the changes and then signed the agreement. Shauna told the man to hang on for a minute, and she came back with a man in a pinstriped suit. I had to show my ID, as did Scott's lawyers and Shauna. He watched as we signed the last copy, and then the new arrival notarized our signatures. Shauna looked at the check to make sure there were no mistakes or additional language printed on them before she handed the papers to them. The 4 men all stood, and none of them offered me their hand to shake. They left the room, and we heard the elevator door close. Shauna had a sneaky grin and said in front of the man who notarized our signatures, "They didn't even read the addendums I inserted. I inserted that any future physical attack would result in Scott paying you even more money. I know you don't want any more out of this, Bernie, but I'll take my piece of the pie if they want to keep forking over $1 million at a time." I said to Shauna, "Come and let me deposit this check into my bank account and write you a check for your fee. I might owe this gentleman for his services as well." The man began laughing and said, "I'm Shauna's uncle and the one responsible for her becoming a lawyer. My firm is next door, and you'll become familiar with us. We are Mrs. Julia McKinley's representatives. She called me and told me that you would be with Shauna this morning. I made sure Shauna knew that I would be in the office this morning and would happily assist if she needed assistance. Thank you for helping, Mr. Marconi. This process has been so overwhelming that I can hardly believe it's happening the way it is. Thank you for working with me and helping me get this finished, Shauna. I may have to go to court for the attempted murder charge, but the police officer's testimony should just about take care of it. Mrs. McKinley wants to establish a case of fraudulent misrepresentation to a federal bank against both Scott Jr. and Sr. We went downstairs to the main bank floor where I made out a deposit slip for the amount, less $200,000 for Shauna. I had Shauna write me a receipt for the money. I made out a transfer to shift this new money into my private money market account. I would look up how to invest it later. Shauna and I had only 1 copy of the settlement. I let her keep it and asked her to copy it at my expense, so I had a detailed record. She said she would make sure the resolution to the suit was recorded in the county clerk's record. Shauna added she would be contacting Julia at her grandmother's. I went out to my truck and drove back to the campus. My head was swimming with everything that had happened so fast. There was a note on my door to speak to the resident, so I knocked on his door, although I figured that he wouldn't be there. The door cracked and then fully opened, revealing the resident holding a baseball bat. He told me to come in. The guy was nervous about something and said, "I don't know what you've gotten yourself into, but it's not healthy to be around you, Bernie." Some bruisers came with a gun and a baseball bat of their own, wanting to know what room was yours. I was able to knock the receiver off the cradle and dial 911 so whoever answered could come help me. The campus police must have been very close because they came running up the stairs to my room. There was almost a gun battle, but the bad guys gave up. The city police came and took them away. I've been too nervous to even go to class. What's going on? I told the resident, it's got to be Scott McKinley related because everything that's happened lately is about Scott. I know he's in jail and isn't going to be granted bail. His dad is about to lose his Chevrolet dealership because the real owner is going to kick him out. That may not have happened yet. Someone must think that Scott could beat the charges against him if the statements I wrote were destroyed. It's not me that'll do it to him, but the chief of police who witnessed him wanting and trying to kill me while attacking me with a knife. Scott did it right in front of him. The chief isn't going to forget that. I'm worried, Bernie. Everyone on the floor could be in danger if thugs like that come back. You need to go somewhere else to stay for a while. Think about it, and think about all the people here in the dorm. I'll hold your room for you so that you can have it if you come back. Like I said, think about it for me and the guys. What a mess. This is bullshit with a man now destined to be in jail for a long time who could still cause me grief. I was hungry, and it was the usual time to meet Julia for lunch, so I put my papers in the room and took off for the cafeteria. I walked in the door, bumping into Julia on her way in. She asked, "How did it go this morning? Did Shauna help you get this taken care of? Do you feel it was fair?" We went through the serving line and found our usual two-chair table by the windows. I told Julia, Shauna had a surprise for me when I read the settlement papers the first time. She pointed out the $100,000 figure had a zero added to it. She said that she felt a jury would probably add more than $1 million to the settlement after looking at all the evidence. We both found language that neither of us liked, and were finally able to get them to agree to the changes. They gave me a cashier's check for $1 million, and I took it downstairs to deposit into my account and give Shauna her 20%. She made about $40,000 an hour considering she probably spent a total of 5 hours on the lawsuit. Not bad. Julia was excited. That's great, Bernie. Now you're assured of having enough money to get you through law school and maybe be able to open a practice. Now I need to convince you to move into Gamma's home. Think about how nice it would be to always be together without worrying about the other guys in the dorm seeing me wander in and out of there. Someone is going to put up a fuss, although cohabitation in the dorms is just about totally accepted. That's something else, Julia. Some men came to the dorm looking for me today and threatened the resident, but he was able to dial 911 without being seen, and the police came and arrested the men. He just asked me to move out of the dorm for a while and promised to keep my room for me in case I want or need to come back. Julia said, "Why would you need to come back? Don't you think we were made for each other? My goodness, fate brought us together and will keep us together. Gamma asked you to come. I'm asking you to come. My aunts will love to have you as part of the family. We don't have to get married right away, but we have to be able to live close or even together. The house is big enough that you'll have a place to study, and I'll bet that grandmother even has internet. She loves all the new technology. The two of us moving in together is a big step, Julia. You're a year older and 2 years ahead of me in school. You know that I have at least 4 more years, and that includes going to summer school and taking heavy loads. You're going to get tired of me spending all of my time studying. What will you do when you graduate? I'll have a lot of choices, Bernie. I can stay in school and get my master's. I can apply for a grad staff position. I can join my sisters and their husbands running an automobile store if grandmother takes the dealership over. Or we can get married and I can get started raising our family. That's all in the future, Bernie. Agree to move into grandmother's home and we'll go from there." I was just staring at Julia when I said, "Let's go talk to your grandmother before I move my stuff in. She's pretty savvy about people, and she'll have an opinion of whether or not we're pushing for us to live together too quickly." Julia said, "Probably not. You heard her tell the story of how she and Grandpa got together. But let's go see her, and then we can come back and get all our stuff." We went for the truck and drove the few blocks to her grandmother's home. It was as if James had radar as he opened the door when we walked up the porch steps. He showed us into the sitting room and said that Julia would be with us in a minute. Grandmother made her entrance wearing a full apron and carrying a platter full of cookies and cupcakes, with Cora following with a tray of coffee cups and a beautiful silver coffee pot. "Now what have you come to talk about, children?" I felt like I was in front of Happy when she smiled at us and eagerly directed us to the goodies on the platter. Cora poured 3 cups of coffee into dainty cups, and I watched as Mrs. McKinley put a half spoon of sugar and a healthy splash of cream in hers. I said to the stately woman wearing the kitchen apron, "You made a comment about the two of us moving in with you the other night. Julia thinks that it would be perfect for us, but I want to know if you think it would be good for us." We haven't known each other all that long, but have progressed in our relationship faster than I'm used to. I've never even dated a girl before, so everything with Julia is new to me. I'm going to be frank with you, Mrs. McKinley, and tell you that we've slept together, which means we have been physical with each other. It was a first for both of us. I was blushing when I continued, and we liked it. It's probable that we would continue our physical relationship if we were to move in here. Would that bother or offend you? Would that be against your moral principles? Please be honest with me, or I would never feel comfortable here. I took a sip of the coffee and sat back next to Julia. The grand old lady smiled at the two of us and said, "That you two have found each other physically is wonderful. That you were each other's first was a wonderful event. Society is different, and a lot of activities are more acceptable during this day and time. I would be uncomfortable if you two were just sampling multiple people, but you two are being exclusive, and although you may be planning a long-term relationship, you're committed to be honest with each other and to assist each other in your goals. No, Bernie, I wouldn't be offended if you were to continue to be physical with Julia. I'm very happy that the two of you have discovered each other and the thrills of loving each other. You may not be able to say those magic words yet, but you were saying them with your bodies when you two made love. Please come live with me, Bernie. Come live with Julia in an illicit, romantic, physical life that will help join the two of you. I do have a stipulation. You must promise me that you will marry Julia should she become pregnant and be your child's father." I looked at Julia and wanted to go hide for a second. That's a hell of a lot to think about. How would I feel if Julia became pregnant? Would I still desire her the same way if she had a big round belly? Would I lovingly look upon a child knowing that it came as a result of a union between Julia and me? All these thoughts were running through my head when I looked at a blushing Julia. I smiled and said, "I will celebrate the day Julia tells me that we're going to be parents. Yes, I will be a good father and husband." The smiling, white-haired lady said, "Good. Now go get your clothing and school materials. I'll be a tough taskmaster and keep both of you studying. I think Bernie can use the small study for working on his schoolwork, and Julia can use the main study as she probably won't spend as much time devoted to intense studying." I finished the small cup of coffee and stood. Julia did the same and hugged her grandmother. "You've given my man a reason to be with me for what is probably the rest of our lives, Gamma." "Thank you, great-grandmother." I don't use the great all the time because I say it all with Gamma. We drove back to campus without saying much and agreed that Julia would have all her stuff ready to carry down in a half hour. I found the resident in a better mood and took him into the room. I pointed to the bed and said, "Fresh sheets there and more on the shelf in the closet. Keep the blankets, the 2 pillows, and all the towels. I'll either get these back or go get some more if I come back. It's not a problem either way. Thanks for moving out, Bernie. I'm not asking where you're going because I don't want to know. My ignorance makes it safer for you. I hope that you reach your goals in school. You've really worked hard so far." I took all my stuff, computer, printer, clothes, radio, and books down to the truck. I gave my key to the resident, and he was smiling when I left. Julia was in the lobby of her dorm with a stack of personal items that included clothes, school supplies, and personal toiletries. Everything easily fit into the truck, and we drove off campus. I checked the odometer when we left and when we pulled into grandmother's home. It wasn't even a half mile. The distance was easy walking if I didn't want to use the truck. Cora was the one who gave us our suites. She had us directly across the hall from each other. She even made a joke that we would probably wear out the carpet between the rooms. She said the idea was for each of us to have our own space if we needed it. I already knew how that might happen. I moved my laptop, printer, school supplies, and books into the small study because that was where I would spend the bulk of my time. I realized that I needed to do some serious clothes shopping when I hung all my clothes in my closet and put the balance into my drawers. My suit was of a very high quality and was still a current style. My white shirts could be newer, but I wasn't embarrassed while wearing them. I should probably have some dress slacks with a sport coat, as well as some nice shirts to go with them. I had a good pair of dress shoes, a pair of dressy loafers, a pair of tennis shoes, and my original heavy-duty shoes. I could use some more underwear, more socks, a couple of new ties, and some shirts that weren't faded. I talked to Julia about going shopping. We slept together that night, but Julia was still wearing panties. I didn't mind as we went to sleep giving each other kisses. The next day, I took Julia to the cafeteria, and she went on to her class from there. I returned to the house and focused on catching up on my classes, which I hadn't worked on for a few days. Later, I drove back to campus and met Julia in the cafeteria at noon. She mentioned she had a special lab from 1 until 4 that day and would appreciate a ride at 4. She said she'd meet me at the library parking lot. Afterwards, I went back home and really focused on my work. I caught up on most of the assignments I had fallen behind on during the past week. With a bit more effort tonight, I'd be able to catch up and stay ahead by tomorrow. That evening, we had a nice supper and spent some time chatting with grandmother. Julia used my computer and printer to work on a paper. Afterward, Julia guided me to the bathroom to brush our teeth and suggested I shower and shave before bed. Later that night, we both studied most of the day on Saturday, and grandmother encouraged us to take a break that evening. She said, "You two are the most studious young people I've ever known. You're so absorbed in your work. How about we go out to Columbia's finest restaurant tonight? I'm craving their special prime rib, only available on Saturdays. James and Cora will be joining us. Wear your best suit, Bernie, and you'll fit right in with the big shots around here. I've also got some news. Your aunts and uncles will be joining us as well." Julia and I rushed through a shower. I quickly shaved, and we dressed in our separate rooms. When we went downstairs, grandmother greeted us, dressed beautifully, with 4 glasses of her best liquor in front of us. Cora came in, looking stunning, and all of us toasted to a successful evening ahead. We promised James that we'd save him some of our drink when we returned home. The restaurant was prepared for us and sat us at a giant table in the back. Grandmother ordered drinks for everyone and told us that we should probably have a couple because there was some shocking information to be announced. Mrs. McKinley dinged her drink glass with her spoon and told everyone at the table to listen. "You men are going to be running McKinley Chevrolet as of Monday morning. Your wives will be there continuing to learn how the business operates. The former part owner has decided not to be here any longer, and I've received a signed agreement that he has returned his portion of the ownership of the business back to me. I am giving each of your 2 families 30% of the business. This was effective yesterday, but there was no reason to disturb the weekend business. All 4 of you will begin on Monday." The matriarch took a sip of her drink and continued, "I was going to divide the business to include Julia, but she's still in school, not 21 yet, and her future is somewhat blurred. I will figure out how to include her if it comes to it. This has been a terrible time for our family, and a time when the trust of a family member has been violated. Scotty has agreed to plead guilty and accept a 10-year sentence for his attack on Bernie, and an additional 5 years for his attempt to steal from the trusts. The feds have agreed not to charge him for the bank fraud, so he's going to be in jail for as much as 15 years unless he's a very good boy. All the money that was embezzled from the trusts by him, and from the business by his father, has been recovered. What's terrible is that I would have given Scotty all the money he could want, the same to his father. They should know that my money is all your money. None of you have ever asked me for a loan of even 25 cents to buy ice cream from the truck that comes around. I've offered money for you to buy or build homes, but you wanted to be independent. Julia won't even use her own trust money for school, and was working a full work week for a while. I'm proud of all of you, and know you will be successful car people. I'm done for now, but I'm sure there will be more. Let's order." The restaurant did have some of the best prime rib I've ever had. It actually was the only restaurant prime rib I ever had. Mrs. McKinley made sure that I had an extra large cut that I savored along with a twice-baked potato that I told Cora I wanted to learn how to make. I noted all the men enjoyed large cuts and ate every morsel the same as I did. James and Cora served some more of the good liquor when we went home, and James had a rather full glass this time. I'm sure it was to make up for not getting any earlier. As we finished and were ready to go to bed, Mrs. McKinley said, "Cora and I were worried about you two the first couple of nights, and then she told me how Julia was almost waking the neighbors. I'm so happy that you found each other. You know that if you want to see a doctor about using the pill to keep from getting pregnant, I will agree to that, Julia. You kids will have to watch Julia's rhythm and use those rubber things otherwise. You decide, but you should make up your minds how you want to handle your passion." I was trying to be embarrassed, but Julia just grinned at her grandmother. She said, "The love we share feels so good that I want to holler out and tell the world how much I love Bernie. I don't know how long this lasts, but I hope it's for a long, long time." The white-haired old lady said, "Your great-grandfather and I enjoyed each other like that until he was almost 70. I know that I always made a lot of noise and he would tease me. It's good that you have that special experience." We went up to bed, and I was able to help Julia serenade the heavens with happy noises. Sunday morning was nice because Cora sat at the small kitchen table and showed Julia and me how to make breakfast for the family. We made French toast with some cheesy scrambled eggs. We all ate at the kitchen table and enjoyed the special breakfast. Julia asked me, "You were saying that you wanted to get some more clothes. How about we go to the mall and find you another suit and some other dress clothes? You need some more regular shirts, as well as a couple of sweaters. It will be spring break pretty soon, so you might want to get some other clothes too. What would you like to do over the break?" "I want to go see my family to make sure all is well. I haven't seen them since the beginning of this semester. I'd like for you to go with me so that they can meet the woman who swept me off my feet. I've written them that I moved into your family's home, but I haven't said that we were lovers. Happy will know, and grandfather will give me a nudge." Julia said, "I'd really like that. You've worked hard since you've been in school and have progressed faster than I would have thought possible. You're finished or about finished with all your second semester classes from what you've shown me, and they amount to another 20 hours. You need 120 hours to finish your bachelor's, so you're better than a third through. That's some tall studying. I lay awake after Julia fell asleep, thinking of how to tell grandfather everything that's happened in such a short time. Should I tell him about the huge amount of money I was given? Would he understand that was how city people resolved issues like that? Scotty'd be buried in one of the caves in the hills down where we lived if you pulled a stunt like he did. I think I'm going to give all the money from Dad's life insurance to Grandpa and Sis so that they can have a little more. I then asked myself, a little more of what? They have all the food they could want. They make a few bucks on sugarcane and always have a little corn left over to sell. The revenuers didn't count the amount of corn, grains, and sugarcane we grew, so they may have suspected but couldn't prove we made any good sipping whiskey. I knew my sister's husband was a good country boy and would never give away that Granddad made some of the best. He was learning to do all the farm work that I used to do, and I knew that he was a great help to Granddad by his demeanor. Spring break was upon us. I told Julia, let's go down home and visit. Then we could drive down to Panama City Beach or over to Daytona. I have enough money for us to enjoy ourselves. I even have a new credit card to use at the fancy hotels. Julia was happy with those plans, and we packed lightly to make the trip. I found a small medicine bottle, washed it out, and had Cora fill it with some of the special spirits grandmother liked so well. I wanted to see if Granddad recognized it. We drove quickly home and surprised everyone, although I had written them and told them the day I would be there. Grandpa and Bryce were doing what Sis said. They were farming over on the north side. Sophie and Happy swarmed Julia so much that you would have thought they hadn't seen a foreigner for years and years. Julia had jeans, a flannel shirt, and some kind of brogans or low boots on in an attempt to look country. I told the two women that I was going to take Julia out to see and meet Granddad and Bryce. Happy wagged her finger at me and said, you be careful sneaking up on them. Bryce is still a little edgy when your Granddad is brewing. That meant they were close to finishing the second or third distilling process. Granddad would have had a warning that revenuers were in the area, or he wouldn't be cooking liquor, so I thought all would be okay. I hollered out to Bryce when we came up to where the caves were. Hey, Bryce, it's Bernie and a friend to see you and Granddad. A figure came from the brush behind us and said, I'm sure glad you hollered. Damn, I'm always so scared revenuers will come up here and catch your Granddad. I know he's careful and we don't do anything to tell the world what we do, but this place really does the family a lot of good by being able to buy all we need other than our food. I showed Julia the well that was still fairly full, and then walked her to the cave where the big double boiler was distilling liquor for the second time, or until Grandpa felt it was just right, or what he called his best. The old man was wearing his usual bibbed overalls, and was as friendly and loving as ever. He hugged me, then Julia, and pulled away from her and looked her in the eye. Can you be a farmer's wife? Julia laughed and said, I'm sure going to try. Grandpa then showed Julia the cave with over 100 barrels of his best. He poured a little from one barrel into a cup and handed it to Julia. I think she surprised him by sipping it the way you're supposed to do with a good liquor. This wasn't moonshine to Grandpa. This was Beck's best. Julia smiled and said, this tastes like the liquor my great-grandmother enjoys. Do you have any customers up in Colombia? It's just an older lady now since great-grandfather died. My great-grandfather asked, are you a McKinley? With a squint of inquiry. The smile Julia had was a dead giveaway, as she nodded her head and answered, I'm a McKinley and hope to be a Beck too. That made Grandpa smile. He said, it's only fitting that my Bernie finds a woman related to a customer I've had for almost 60 years. Grandpa tested some of the drippings and then poured some more mixture of something into the pot that was boiling off. He came to us and said, I need you, Bernie. I need to make a trip to Kansas City with a load, and Bryce is still acting too funny for me to let him drive. How about loading up the old pickup and driving me up there? We can stop in Columbia and give Mrs. McKinley some of my aged stuff. I think I've outdone myself with this batch. We'll take her a 5 or 10-gallon milk can of the good brew. Have you been sipping it with her? Julia said it for me. Grandmother is always giving Bernie and me some of your best to quiet us down. She says my great-grandfather said a little sip was best just before bed to make everyone relax and sleep well. Grandpa said, so true. That's also the way to encourage a new crop of kids. This stuff is like what they call an aphrodisiac and makes the women's bodies want to produce babies. Julia didn't laugh, but gave my grandfather a good smile. I asked Granddad, is the truck in shape to make the trip? It will be after you tune it up and check it out real good. This trip will be full of 10-gallon cans, so make sure the overload springs are set right. We'll load up tomorrow and make the trip up and back in a day. Your lady is welcome to ride along if she wants to. Julia was still smiling when I said that I would see Grandpa and Bryce at the house. On the walk back, Julia said, I love your family. They are so typical of people in the country. They make a living, but don't brag about it or flaunt it in front of others. They grow their own food and probably give away half of what they grow or put up canned. I wish my dad and Scotty had been raised in this environment. They would have been so much better off. I played with Sissy's little guy while the three women worked in the kitchen. I talked Julia into watching the little guy while I went out to check the pickup. There were spark plugs in the tool room, so I did a quick tune-up, including changing of the gas filter. Grandpa always forgot it, and Bryce was following what he did. I changed the oil and filter, greased all the service points, and then checked the settings of the overload springs. I had them at maximum, which would make the ride a little rough, but would be necessary considering the weight we would be carrying. We would probably be carrying 20 10-gallon milk cans, so that would be like 1,600 pounds. That's way over what we should be carrying. I checked the tread on the tires and they were all new. At least Grandpa didn't let the small things get us. At supper, Grandpa asked, "How about trucking 20 cans to KC, and then 20 cans down to Nashville? I'll still have a hell of a lot more, but 400 gallons ought to be enough for a while. We'll pack a 10-gallon can for Mrs. McKinley if you're going to be staying there often. I'll make it a gift from you." I woke my love at 5 the next morning and said that she needed to get up if she was going to KC with us. She was almost instantly out of bed and dressed. Bryce had driven the truck up to the mountain and loaded 21 10-gallon cans of Beck's Best into the truck. Grandpa, Julia, and I had breakfast and then began the long trip. We drove well within the speed limit to Columbia because of the heavy load. I unloaded a 10-gallon can for James and put it on the back porch. James grinned and told me that Julia, Gamma, would be pleased. We made the drive to a warehouse in Kansas City, Missouri, where Grandpa completed his deal. He had a bunch of money in a fancy briefcase and 20 empty milk cans that had been thoroughly cleaned. We drove a little faster going home, but not that much. This was an old truck. We talked about the stuff I was concerned about and admitted to Grandpa that I took money from people who were trying to hurt me. I was surprised that he understood and said that I had done the right thing. I told him I wanted the family to have my dad's school money, and he agreed to take it. We parked the truck in the yard and went inside just in time for supper. We made another trip to Nashville the next day and delivered another 20 10-gallon cans full of Beck's Best. That would leave Grandpa with only 200 gallons of his best to sell to locals and his own use. It was legal if he could trade for cattle, hay, grain, or anything else. He was illegal as soon as he took a buck for a sip. Julia wanted to drive to Panama City Beach, so we did. I had to buy a swimsuit, but Julia had a couple that were probably close to illegal. There were signs that said teabacks were not to be worn and tops were to be in place at all times. Neither happened, and the cops patrolling the beach were looking the other way. There were a lot of naked tops that had bottoms on that showed both cheeks and barely covered the good stuff. The girls who were sort of modest presented some impressive camel toes. Julia kept pointing out women who she thought I would enjoy checking out. I kept telling her that I couldn't take my eyes off her yet, so she should give me a few years to get used to her gorgeous body. We drove slowly when it was time to go back north, stopping overnight at a Best Western roadside hotel and messed up some sheets. Grandmother was very happy for our return when we arrived and couldn't thank me enough for the gift of 10 gallons of Beck's Best. I helped James pour the 10 gallons into glass gallon jugs to make it easier to handle. I showed him how we washed the big cans out to make sure they wouldn't have any alcohol smell in them. Not surprising was Grandmother's now larger glass of the good stuff. Cora and James joined us more openly than before. I knew that Grandfather and Happy enjoyed some of that stuff almost every evening, so I didn't think too much about it. Denise Ponder and Jonathan Morgan helped me sign up for my sophomore year of study and helped convince the professors to allow me to self-study. They had some lectures they said were must attend, and I didn't have a problem with that. What was funny was that I found the information they covered was in every instance already covered in the text, but later in the course. I took the midterm and then begged to be given the finals for all the classes for my third semester. I was signed up for a full load for the summer and already signed up for my fourth semester. I wouldn't be able to dodge lectures this time, but I could cram them into mornings to give me time to work on other self-study classes during the afternoons and evenings. You tend to forget what time of year it is or what others are doing when you're at the university and focusing only on your classes. Julia and I went down to the farm to visit for a week, giving us some time to renew our determination to learn all we could and finish this part of our lives. I showed Julia how boring it could be to cultivate corn and the excitement of cutting, baling, and hauling the hay bales. She learned to stack the hay on the wagon and to keep her gloves on. Sophie tried to teach her, but Sophie's belly full of her second child kept getting in the way. Granddad and I went to a few auctions to buy stock, but always ended up only buying calves or yearlings. We needed a full-sized beef for the family freezer and another for the folks in the neighborhood who were having trouble making ends meet. The time down there was spent doing a variety of things, including doing some repairs for some of the elderly neighbors who were unable to do for themselves. Julia enjoyed all the work and was pretty beat up by the time we went back north to school. I think Julia was so fascinated by Happy that she wanted to stay down there to just learn from the woman. I finished 3 5-hour classes during the summer and was ready for my 5th semester that was almost my 6th. My classes were more focused on my major of psychology and sociology, with a heavy background in English. I was able to limit the English literature to focus on composition and understanding various language arts, in which I learned that law was a language art. Julia graduated at the end of my junior year of school. She had accepted a grad staff position that would assist her in paying for her MBA. She said that her education would now be focused on helping me, the family automobile franchise, and our future in a small town. She felt that her knowledge would help all around her. I took the dreaded LSAT test at the end of my 4th year after having been tutored by both Denise Ponder and Shauna Marconi. The two had been very helpful while I was working so hard to complete school as quickly as possible. It was Denise who had called Grandmother McKinley to ask for a private meeting along with Shauna to give us the news. Grandmother wouldn't have it the way they wanted, but had Julia's aunts and their husbands attend a special dinner. Grandmother had James bring all some glasses of Beck's Best in around the table when we had been served dessert and some coffee. She announced, Ms. Ponder wanted to have this be a private meeting, but I insisted. It was only fitting that Ms. Marconi join us, as she was instrumental in helping Bernie get to this point. I don't know what Ms. Ponder is going to reveal, but I can tell you that the results are going to be positive with the way Bernie worked to get to this point. What say you, Denise? Denise was now flustered and smiled to everyone. She took a healthy sip of Beck's Best and looked straight at me. You not only passed the LSAT, Bernie, but your application to our law school has been accepted. You've accomplished a lot in a short amount of time. Shauna and I will be in the audience to watch you receive your degree. You have a choice of waiting for the new term or beginning the available classes right away since you were immediately accepted. You don't have to tell me now, but we should talk this weekend. Julia told the table. No one mentioned that Bernie is 3rd in his class and only attended those lectures deemed important. He has fulfilled his commitment to several people to work hard and provide them with his work. I know how hard he's worked because he was always buried in his books and not in me. That didn't come out right. I mean, he was always working on his studies and not being distracted by me. Grandmother said, Bernie has been an inspiration to us all in many ways. He's worked toward becoming a lawyer, and he's helped at the dealership when you've needed him. He's family and has proven it. I think Julia has another announcement, but she wants to wait. Come on, Julia, let us in on your secret. I looked to see Julia's face blazing in embarrassment. She leaned to me, kissed my cheek, and then as she stood said, I've kept this from Bernie so that he could focus on studying, but I'm going to be showing the world now. Julia used her open hand to smooth her blouse over her belly that I had noticed had been growing. Bernie and I are going to be parents in about 3 months. I was so shook that I almost threw up. Holy shit. The woman I had continuously been with for almost 2 years is going to have our baby. I stood and said, Ladies and gentlemen, please observe the following demonstration of my love of Julia. I went to one knee and held Julia's hand. We should have done this before, but it's now time for it to be done. Julia, my love, will you marry me? I reached into my dress slacks pocket and pulled out the small box that was there, while 2 tears ran down Julia's face. I opened the box, and Julia's eyes widened in awe. She leaned in, kissed me on the lips, and then said, Yes, Bernie Bernard Beck, I want to marry you. I placed the ring on her finger, and we kissed again. We stood together, embracing in a heartfelt hug that seemed to solidify our commitment. The men all gave me backslaps and congratulatory gestures, while the women surrounded Julia, expressing their joy for her. Later, after an evening of celebrating, Julia asked, How long have you had that ring? I watch you so closely. When did you get it? Holding her close, I told her, I decided to propose the week we moved in here, but you kept saying we'd talk about marriage later. I bought the ring and have been carrying it around, waiting for the perfect moment. I love you so much, Julia, and I can't believe we're going to be parents. I promise to be a good father. Julia smiled and said, And I promise to be a good wife and mother. I have a lot to learn, but I have time. Gamma says she'll help me with everything I need to know. We went to bed that night, feeling the weight of our new chapter and quietly reflecting on the future ahead of us. Julia asked at breakfast the next morning, When can we go down and tell Jeb and Happy? Your sister is going to be so excited, and everyone will want us to get married right away. My aunts will want a big flowery wedding, but I want something simple and uncomplicated, just you and me. I'll work on my family, and you'll be in charge of yours. You know, it might be nice to have the wedding in that small church you and your family have gone to for so many years. We would find out soon, because I convinced Mrs. McKinley to go with us to visit my family down in the country. I had called and talked to Sissy and then Grandpa. He said that Julia and I could sleep on the couch and Mrs. McKinley could sleep in my room. I told Grandpa, I think she is going to want to have her man, James, drive us down, so I need to find room for him. There was a and then he said, we'll work it out. We've been making some plans and working on them. We'll be ready if we make an effort. I had several things to do with school during this week and most of the next one, so I was limited to enjoying summer before the early summer semester. I was given assignments with a stack of books to read for the second summer period and wondered how I was going to read that much in the time allotted. I called to find out if they were ready for us, and Grandpa said, we have all the room necessary for Mrs. McKinley's man and her maid, as well as you two. Happy is so excited that she has probably lost 10 pounds she shouldn't have. Come show her Julia's tummy, and she'll be the Happy we all know. I went to the Chevy dealership and made a deal with one of the aunts to trade my pickup in for a used Suburban that would carry all of us. The big car or truck, whatever it is, has 3 seats in it and was perfect for us. I didn't want to use grandmother's limousine since that would be too far out for that neighborhood. Our arrival on the farm was a celebration of the joining of city and country folks. Grandmother and Happy were soulmates as soon as they met. The two instantly were in the kitchen making something from both of their repertoires. James and Cora enjoyed looking around the farm and learning about various things from Sis and Bryce's almost 4-year-old. There was a new addition just off the lane road to the house. A new home had been built with the anticipation of more children, as it had 5 bedrooms, and they only had 2 kids so far. They had worked hard to finish it, and Sis had quickly furnished it so that they could move in to empty the rooms for guests. Grandma slept in my room, while James and Cora each had a room, and Julia and I slept on the couch. It worked. Happy was nearly delirious that Julia was pregnant, and we were getting married. Julia had a few conversations with Happy and her gamma before they went to see the local preacher. The man was a little put off that Julia and I hadn't waited to get married before we had children, but agreed that he had married a swarm of kids fresh out of high school in June for that same reason for many years. I made a $100 donation to help make for smoother sailing. Mrs. McKinley didn't want to wait, and had the preacher perform the wedding in front of just our family and a couple of friends of mine. Julia's aunts and husbands drove down and stayed in local roadside cabins normally used by fishermen. I don't think Julia or I needed the service. We were already man and wife in our minds. Julia and Sissy compared baby bumps, showing off who might be closer to having their baby. Sissy was probably the winner of that one, but Julia was just as proud. I commented at the big dinner table, I haven't been gone very long, but Bryce and Sissy have 2 kids and another on the way. This family is exploding, and Julia and I are going to join in. Grandma McKinley said, Bernie is determined to come back here to either practice law or become the county attorney. I'm going to look for some property to build the couple a house as a wedding present. Bernie has close to 2 more years of studying to become a lawyer, so I don't have to rush, but I'll need help to find somewhere he and Julia can raise a family. Grandpa said, Bernie has always been a homebody, so I think the place for him will be at the Miller place next door. It burnt down a while back, and the Millers have been gone for years. I think it's coming up at the tax sale, so I'll get it for Bernie, and you can build the kids something nice. He'll be just across that wooded stretch, and will always know where help is. Happy would be the happiest if they lived here, but kids often want something of their own. Julia spoke up and said, it would be good for us to have a home site, but I'd love to live right here to have and raise my baby. It's going to be a few years before Bernie is able to earn a living practicing law. He might have a few bucks saved for us to live on, but why waste it when we've been offered a great place to live? I thought Happy was going to become speechless with happiness to have us live in the house with them. Julia was being herself by wanting to blend in and not stand out as some self-important person. I think her gamma was the proudest. It was something she would have done. Julia gave birth to a gorgeous baby girl at Thanksgiving. I was so proud of Julia and the baby, but she said that she was disappointed it wasn't a boy for me to raise and teach. We had many talks about it while we waited the customary 6 weeks for her insides to heal up. I kept telling her it wasn't hers to decide. It was divine intervention that decided if we should be raising a little girl or boy. My 2 remaining years of law school flashed by, and I was all of a sudden taking the Missouri bar exam in Jefferson City, Missouri. I had stayed in touch with the county attorney and the local lawyer who wanted to sell me his practice back home. I could buy it, but I also knew that the area population had grown enough that it might support 2 lawyers. The county attorney decided to run for another 4-year term, so that wasn't where I should go. The man did offer me a place on his staff knowing that he wouldn't do anything, and I would do everything for a junior attorney's salary. I declined and said I might run against him next term. I found a home at the end of the business district that I could buy and convert into a decent office. There was now more money in my investment account than what I had started with, so I had enough to remodel the house and make it into a good, friendly place to do business. I had a nice sign made that hung on a bar off 2 posts that declared that Bernie Beck, attorney at law, was in the building and ready to do business. I had a couple of property disputes to work on, and then an accident involving a concrete truck that ended up being something the entire county heard about. I won a big settlement for the client over the next year, and had to help them out during the proceedings because the breadwinner was now nearly paralyzed and couldn't work. His huge settlement paid me back, plus paid me my attorney's fees. It was at our home celebration dinner that Julia told the family there, "We're going to have another baby, and it's going to be a boy this time because it's all different." Little Julie was totally different than this one, so it has to be a boy. My practice grew from people I knew and who I had gone to school with. The man with the practice in the bank building came to me and asked if I wanted to buy him out. I said, "Look, you promised to give or sell me your practice when I graduated from law school. You didn't, so I started my own and began practicing law. Find someone else to sell out to now, because I'm already earning a living doing what I set out to do." The guy's argument was that I was living at home and mustn't have been making enough to afford my own place. I had to explain, I have a savings account that has purchased the Miller place and more than enough money to build a mansion on it. My grandpa and grandma want me, my wife, and daughter to live with them. Why would I live anywhere else? My wife and daughter are happy, my great-grandparents are happy, my sister, her husband, and their now 3 kids are happy, so why should I build that mansion? Keep your clients and good luck in selling your practice. My practice had rapidly grown with me getting all kinds of small-town lawyer stuff to do. There were a couple of criminal cases that I didn't want to handle, but I did anyway. One guy got off because the prosecuting attorney hadn't done his homework. I felt bad because the guy was guilty as sin. It wasn't my problem, but I still felt bad. One of the 17-year-old neighbor boys got a 13-year-old neighbor girl pregnant. He was legal, but she wasn't by a year. I had to do all kinds of contortions to keep the statutory assault charge at bay until both kids' parents were willing to help them get married. The girl's family had money and paid me my fees, which really didn't cover the effort that I put into the case. I now had a legal secretary who had moved to the area. She was an attractive lady, but could have been my mother. We got along great, and she was good for the office since she went to a different church than my family did, so we were able to spread the word of mouth that much faster. A couple of the small resorts had some state and federal problems with their operation because they raised feeder fish for bait. Who would know all the regulations for doing something as simple as that? The resorts were able to comply by building tanks in the lake instead of having freestanding tanks. They could still recirculate the water and ended up building other very large tanks to raise trout to restock the lakes and for local markets. My son was born on schedule. Julia was still busy with Julie and now had Bernard Jr., or BJ. I worked hard every day, keeping busy by visiting every business in a 100-mile radius. I was picking up legal work that people needed done, plus there was a constant stream of people wanting to transfer property, have wills created, and use me to apply for building permits. Julia proved to be very fertile and was almost immediately pregnant again. She said that it would be a boy, and it was. We named this one Bill after my dad. It was now becoming a little cramped in the old farmhouse with us having 3 kids. Julia had a small desk in our bedroom that she used to do our billing and record keeping. She needed more room, but she wanted to be home with her babies. Julia decided that we needed to build our house so her Gamma could move down to be with us. Her Aunt Jill came down and had some architects design a massive home that would house us, Gamma and her staff, as well as Grandpa and Happy since they would eventually need to be cared for. Bryce had learned well and was now in charge of the stills and Beck's Best. He was still growing his own grains and enough sugar cane to supply the neighbors with sugar and cane mixed as a supplement for the stock. I would still have to help him with the initial fermentation and distilling, but that was only for a couple of weeks and mostly on weekends. Happy, Grandma Julia, and my Julia went to the big stores in Kansas City and picked out furniture for the entire new house the day it was completed. They had gone to several stores to find exactly what they wanted and had it shipped and delivered in 2 moving vans and also set up. The aunts came to help get all the curtains up and the furniture in place. Cora and James brought Grandmother Julia down to look through the house and discovered that the interior was very close to her home in Columbia, but larger with more specific areas or wings for people. Grandpa thought the place was wonderful, and Happy was ecstatic to have the new kitchen and help from Cora, Julia, and Mrs. McKinley, the other Julia. My practice had almost quadrupled from the first year and was paying enough to offset what would have been a debt on the original office that had been a house. There was enough business for me to find another young attorney and spend some time soliciting business from the other business owners in town and the surrounding areas. It's amazing how being at the right place at the right time can be a great business practice. The big city law firm who bought the retiring lawyer's practice didn't have a clue on how to deal with country folk and drove them to me. My legal secretary wanted help, so she was in charge of finding someone to help her. She found another older lady legal secretary who wanted to live in a small community. I think I was the most amazed that the area around our county could support a law office as large as ours. We were still locally famous for the large settlement from the concrete company and had people come to us for all kinds of auto accidents and various work-related accidents. I would often need to have the potential client go somewhere else because I already represented the business where the accident happened. That person often went to the big city where they would put a substandard or new attorney on the case. I knew how to prepare to win a case in every way, while the big city people felt there was no way a country lawyer would be a problem. I usually sent them home to go back to school. I had learned to get all the information and have it ready to properly present while in law school and while practicing. My family had all moved into the new home and were renting the old farmhouse out to an older couple who had lost their home to their mortgage company. Grandpa and Bryce each had one of those fancy four-wheel drive carts that let them go over to the old farm to take care of stock and keep track of the place. Grandpa had known the man who rented our old place was born and raised in the area since he was a child. Happy knew the woman from church and visiting over the years. The one they didn't know well was their son, an out-of-work person who knew all the tricks to keep getting his unemployment checks and looked to be going to get a disability from Social Security. It was when I opened my own office that I had bought an older used Impala. The car ran great and had everything I needed. I kept it up, and although the ugly green paint was faded, the car was everything I needed. It became almost a symbol of me around the area. I could go to work in jeans, boots, and a flannel shirt driving my old green Impala, and everyone would wave at me as I drove by. My wife, Julia, didn't like the fact that I drove that old car, so I had to convince her that it was a symbol that I was just one of the people in the county and surrounding area and not some self-important jerk. Julia had the fairly new Suburban from the Columbia family dealership, so I told her, "Have Happy watch the kids, and you and I will make the rounds for business in the Suburban one day and the old Impala the next." Julia accepted the challenge and dressed down for her, and went with me while I went to talk to clients the way I always did. No one waved at us, and no one honked their horn to say hi. We had to be inside before people recognized us when we went to the cafe for lunch. We went to town dressed up a little the next day, as I had an appointment with the bank about a legal matter, but we went in the old green Impala. People waved, honked, and one guy came out of his house to stop me to ask about a problem. People were already hollering at me for running around on my wife when we went into the cafe. They knew Julia and were just teasing, but she understood how I used that old car to let people know that I was one of them. Julia sat on my lap one morning and told me, "You've done it again. I think this one is a girl again, but it's confusing because I get both feelings. Isn't it great that we're going to have another baby? I'm still so in love with you that I'm just floating along being as happy as happy. No one knows yet except the doctor. So when can I tell them? Do it tonight. Have Cora, Happy, and your Gamma help make a special supper and announce it then. Call your aunts and have them come down too. We have plenty of beds for them all. I'm very excited and know we're going to continue to be good parents." Grandpa had me outside by the little barn I had built to help make the place look like a farm before I left that morning. Grandpa said, "I'm worried about the Larson kid. He never does anything except go to town to play cards and drink. He'll go down to Mobile and gamble fairly often, but he doesn't have the money to do that. I need to watch him, Bernie, and you should probably have the law watch him too." That worried me while driving into town to carry on the day's business. I went by the sheriff's office and found him at his desk. He warmly greeted me, although I usually was his adversary. He wanted to know what I needed or wanted. "You know the Larsons who rented our old home, Sheriff. They're good people, but Grandpa is worried and is concerned that their kid, Robert, might be a problem. You need to check up on his past to make sure that he isn't someone of interest to the feds or state. He seems to have more money than he should have by going down to Mobile and gambling fairly often. Grandpa thinks that his folks might be afraid of him. Help me help those folks and find out if there is a problem with the kid." The sheriff punched in some characters on his computer and nodded to me. "I have him right here, and he does have a past. It seems that he may have been involved in some bank robberies, but was never arrested for them. It looks like he doesn't have any fingerprints on file, so none of the forensics has him in on those robberies. You may have a good suspect for some older problems. Be careful, though, as this guy could be very dangerous. He's the combination of country bumpkin and wild man we create down here." I hadn't heard that before, but could understand how it fit. Grandpa said he would be prepared when I told him what I knew. I knew Grandpa had several shotguns, and he had a lot of double-aught buckshot rounds that were used on predators that came around the farm. We only had chickens here, along with a calf and year-and-a-half-old steer that would be table fare soon. Our place wasn't a working farm, just a big home with some stock. The fields were all worked with our equipment from the old farm that Bryce and I took care of. I went by the local gunsmith store and discussed buying a handgun or two when I went to town. The man said that I could buy all I wanted, but had to go through the state and federal background checks. It didn't seem to matter, so I did everything required and was able to buy 4 handguns. I bought 3 9mm Glocks and a .357 revolver, because the gunsmith said most women prefer a revolver. After the 3-day wait there was before I could pick them up, I took my wife to a pistol range in Springfield and taught her to use the revolver and then the Glock. She preferred the Glock and scored very nicely on the range. I used the revolver and scored okay, but not nearly as well as I did with the Glock. We now had a Glock at home, one always with Julia and one with me. Grandpa had his old .45 long-barreled pistol that he said he could scratch the back of an ant at 25 feet with. I traded the .357 revolver for another Glock, so I had one in the car and one at the office, where I learned both my secretary and her new assistant were both proficient with handguns, pistol-packing mamas. Missouri is lenient toward guns and makes it easy to get a concealed weapon permit. I made sure Julia as well as James had one. Grandpa said that he didn't need one because when he carried his .45 it was visible and Missouri had an open carry law. All that talk about guns was to prepare you for what happened to the Larsons. The way the story was told, the kid, Robert, came home from town very drunk one night, driving erratically enough that one of the sheriff's deputies followed him all the way home. The deputy turned his red and blue lights on when they reached the house, which must have made the kid angry or nervous because he got out of his car firing a handgun at the deputy's car. The deputy was struck by a bullet, but not seriously. He was able to call for assistance for the other night patrol car, as well as the state police. The gun battle continued until Robert was finally hit and knocked down. The senior Mr. Larson came from the house carrying his shotgun about that time, which the deputy thought was meant for him. So he shot Mr. Larson, who fell down, but was only wounded. The other county deputy arrived in time to see Robert get up from the ground and begin firing at both deputies now. A state patrolman came to the house and was also fired on. With all 3 law officers shooting back at Robert, he ended up being shot 11 times before he quit shooting back. It was later learned that the 3 officers had fired over 100 rounds. Robert died, and they found he had been involved in several homicides when they ran his fingerprints. His pistol had been the gun that killed a couple of men up in Kansas City and one in Chicago. Grandpa later learned that Mrs. Larson had been cleaning out Robert's room and found a very large money cache. They decided not to tell the law about it and live their lives off the son's probably ill-gotten monies. Julia was only about 4 months along with our 4th baby when she finally went back to the doctor for her first real baby exam. She came into the law office with a funny look on her face. She sat down on one of the desk chairs and just stared at me. I asked, "What's the matter, Julia? What did the doctor have to say? Is there a problem?" Julia didn't seem to know whether she should laugh or cry. She got up, came around the desk, and sat on my lap. My sweet wife and mother of our children hugged me and said, "I hope you won't be mad, honey. We're going to have twins. There are 2 of them in here. We really did it this time, didn't we?" I tried to joke with her and replied, "The new house is big enough for more kids, and I'd bet you can find help down here for when you have them. The other 3 are doing well, with the little one already trying to walk. Be happy that you're a healthy specimen of motherhood. I'll have the doc do a clip job on me when you have these 2. No more baby making for you." Julia teased, "But what if I decide that I need to fool around with some young guy who is just full of it? What's going to protect me?" I suggested, "You should ask who's going to protect him. You, my sweet, are my one and the only woman I've ever been intimate with and the only woman I'm ever going to be intimate with. You constantly tell me how much you love me, and I still act like a jealous shrew with you. I wouldn't blame you for trying out some of the handsome young guys I see at the grocery store. There are going to be further complications with the do's and don't do's, along with the girls who will be working the gardens if we get some nanny help. We were able to find a very nice Mexican girl who loves children. It didn't take her any time to have the kids wanting to be with her when mom and dad weren't available. Julia was home most days, but she spent a lot of her work time there working the office accounts. We had many clients who we wanted to keep current as monthly and quarterly billing accounts, and usually only billed the minimum for their ongoing retainer. Grandmother McKinley seemed to flourish being down in the country. She would have James drive her to town or to one of the bigger cities. Springfield and Columbia are about the same distance. St. Louis and Kansas City, for some really big cities, are about the same distance by car, of course. Those trips usually required at least one overnight stay. Bernie Jr. came to see me with a serious look on his face one morning after the twins were delivered. To us by the stork, of course. Tony the Tiger, Captain Crunch, or even the Wheaties I liked couldn't get the scowl off his face. BJ, for Bernie Jr., finally told me his problem. He told me, "I'm almost 5 years old, and no one will let me out of the house unless an adult is going to be with me. I know what not to do and won't go away from the house and barn. I want to be outside and do things." Julie's only a couple of years older than me and doesn't like to be outside as much as me. Grandpa and Bryce won't take me with them when they go off to do whatever they do. I can catch chickens that get out of their pen or make sure there aren't any loose strings from the bales mixed in with the loose hay and straw. Give me some rows of garden to pull weeds, and I'll do any of that, but let me be outside. I asked my son, tell me about your schoolwork. Are you keeping up with it? Maria doesn't understand that I can read just about anything as well as Julie, and know to look up words I don't know. She's taught Julie and me Mexican, or I guess that's Spanish, and I've been learning the Spanish grammar. They spell a lot of things funny. Gamma is teaching us German, and that is a funny language. You do a lot of growling and stuff. We try to talk to each other in German, and we understand her pretty well. She says we tell her the right things too. We're going to learn French next. I looked at my son more intensely and asked, so you're bored with what we have for you at age 5? I'll talk to some people who know how much kids can absorb. All of us together will have you mentally busy. Let's see if your mom will let you play outside until we can find more things for you to do. You know she keeps you in so that she knows you're safe, don't you? I don't have any friends to play with, and the kids my age at church go to kindergarten, Daddy. They don't even know how to read yet. Aunt Sophie's older too, my cousins, are like I am and don't go to school, but Mom won't let me run over there by myself. I remembered how I could follow my dad when he was still alive, and even Grandpa and Great-Granddad when they would allow it. I don't remember how old Sissy and I were when we were outside all the time, but I know that it was before kindergarten. There were times when I didn't follow all the rules, but none of my adventures came back to bite me on the butt. I think that's another reason I've always been independent and determined to make it on my own. Let's go talk to your mother. Stay quiet unless you're asked. Let me do the talking. Julia hadn't settled down at her desk, yet since she was sitting in her rocker, nursing the twins Jeb and Deb. That was Julia's fault because she wanted to name the twins after some of my family. So we had a Zebediah and a Deborah, my grandmother's name, which came out Jeb and Deb. Our third child, a boy named Bill, was happily playing on the floor. Julie must have been in her room, or under her great-great-grandmother's feet somewhere near the kitchen. I love my family. I softly spoke to Julia while the twins nursed. BJ is becoming old enough to safely play outside by himself. He's smart and minds better than most of the kids you see his age. When have you had to yell at or for him after church while the kids are all out running around? I know that you want to keep him safe, but he's a farm boy and needs to be outside doing things a boy can do out there. Have him pull some weeds in the garden a couple mornings a week, and then let him do those things a boy wants to do. Julia looked up from lovingly watching her baby's nurse and said, I just worry, Bernie. I wouldn't know if he were to get into trouble, but you're right. He does need to be outside more. It's only a short run through the edge of the woods to go to Sophie's house, so he might go over there and play with her kids. They could all run back over here for lunch or to play. She smiled at BJ and me, and then at her now sleeping infants. She nodded at me, which meant for me to pick one up, burp him her, rewrap a blanket on him her, and put him her back in the bassinet. I did the second one without thinking about which one was Jeb or Deb, and then held my hand out to pull Julia up. She hugged me and softly said, I love you. Those soft words made my whole life come into a mental image, with a glow around my thoughts. Julia would think of another reason why I shouldn't go every time I wanted to schedule the clip job to be done in Colombia. My loving wife would be all over me wanting us to do some serious loving when her 6 weeks of abstinence were complete. One evening, when we went to bed and it was obvious that Julia wanted some loving, I told her, Julia, lover, we'll end up with 6 kids if we're not careful. Your body has done enough by giving us the 5 we've had. Julia was lovingly kissing me and trying to keep me ready for our joining. I never had a problem being ready for my wife. Julia said, I know that we shouldn't, but we have a big house, we have plenty of money to feed us, and I love being a mother to our children and wife to you. Think back to our first time together in your dorm room. We even talked like a baby could happen and we would welcome it. I just feel like it's my way to give the family something special, Bernie. We continued talking about it, but completed our wonderful loving until we were both totally satisfied with the way we had joined together again. We went to sleep wrapped in each other's arms, filled with love for each other and our family. We celebrated the twins' first birthday, but there was sadness. Julia's gamma was declining and had difficulty getting around. Her condition weakened until James and Cora had to help her move from place to place in the house. We had a doctor come to see her weekly, but it was obvious that time was catching up with her. Grandpa was also showing the ravages of age and couldn't drive himself in the cart any longer if he wanted to visit the brewing area. Bryce or I had to drive him. Sophie and I got together at my kitchen table and talked about what to do with Happy since she was just about unable to take care of herself any longer too. That's when the worst week in Julia's and my lives happened. James came for me Sunday morning and said that Cora couldn't wake Grandma Julia. I went to her, and she had passed during the night. I made the calls to Julia's aunts with tears running down my face. I truly loved that feisty old lady. She wanted to be buried with her cousin husband in Colombia, so we had the local funeral parlor prepare her and had a visitation one night here, and then sent her to Colombia for another visitation, the funeral, and burial. Jill made sure that the tombstone was updated to include Julia lying next to her husband. Happy had some kind of attack that was probably a massive stroke, but you didn't know at her age in the early 80s while this was going on. She lasted almost 12 hours before leaving us. Grandpa had me go downstairs to the kitchen where he, Sophie, and I had some of his oldest, best, that was kept for special occasions. He told me, "I've had a wonderful life, Bernie. Happy was the part of my life that kept me together when we lost your grandparents, and then your mom and dad. I'm not very strong any longer, son, and would rather join my Happy wherever she is now. Don't be angry at me for leaving, but it's my time. You've become the best crop of people I've ever raised." We drank a couple of half glasses of Beck's Best. Grandpa died that night. I think my Julia cried as much for Happy and Grandpa as she did for her Gamma. This had become one of the worst weeks of my life. We were driving back and forth to Colombia, and then locally, since Grandpa wanted to be buried in the small family cemetery on the farm. The Larsons had moved, so the farmhouse was empty right now, and there was a place for some of those who needed a restroom while out watching the burial. James and Cora came into the office while I was trying to catch up on some of the work I had let slide the next week. The two sat down, and James spoke up. "Cora and I have been with Julia for close to 30 years. You need to help us resettle, because we're both lost right now. You've always been the one who guides and directs the family, so help us, Bernie." I looked at the two and said, "Why change where you are? That woman has probably left you with a way to live the rest of your lives. I haven't read her will yet, but I will this week, and I do have the ability to tell you two to live where you are now for the rest of your lives. You have a car, a salary that won't stop, and a bunch of people who enjoy being around you, so why leave?" Cora was almost sobbing as she said, "I just thought that you would want us to move away since Julia passed. Both of you listen to me. You two are family. We may not be blood-related, but we're your family now and forever. James can do the driving for a lot of things, and Cora can help Maria feed us if you want to be busy. We may have to have more help at home with all the kids around anyway." All the aunts and husbands came to the farm to visit and powwow over the matriarchs will that weekend. James, Cora, and Maria had helped me get ready with a lot of snacks and 2 gallons of Beck's Best before the big meeting Saturday night. When all were at the table, I said, "You all know that grandmother made me her estate's executor a few years back. As the overseer of her properties, I've tried to keep up with it all as she desired. I've had to exceed her requests to keep up the Columbia home, but it's been worth it. Listen carefully the first time through, and I promise to slowly go through it again so we all understand. James and Cora, please serve everyone, including yourselves, a couple of fingers of grandmother's favorite beverage. I'll go through the will while you sip." Grandmother was a very loving person and spoke of her caretakers first. This first part is for James and Cora. I'm reading directly from her will. To James and Cora, "You two have tried to hide your relationship from me for all these years, but I'm no dummy and know that you've been lovers since you both came to work with me. Your salary will continue until you pass on to that other side, but I want you both to know that you can live with my great-granddaughter, Julia, or you can go back and live at the home in Colombia. Live in both places if you want, but know that you're welcome in either one for the rest of your lives. You will be provided with sufficient funds to keep the pantry full and to be comfortable in that big old house. I do have a stipulation. I want you two to marry and continue to give your secret smile to each other for the rest of your lives." James and Cora were hugging each other with tears on both their faces. To the granddaughters and their husbands, "I'm leaving the automobile dealership to you free and clear of any debt. I'm sure that you will be generous with your children and grandchildren. Each of you and each of your children have a trust to be given to them when they reach the age of 25. That one paragraph was enormous, as it guaranteed the next several years to be profitable for the dealership. To Julia and her family, I leave the balance of all my earthly possessions. I know Bernie will continue to look after the family, James, and Cora, and will make the appropriate donations in the family name over the years. To all of you, I'll be watching over you, and although I can't intervene with your mortal lives, I will be with you with my love forever." I said, "There is another 5 pages of small type that lists several pieces of property the McKinleys own that Julia and I, along with the other family members, will decide what to do with. I'm sure we'll all agree if any of you want to build another home on the land. I'm also sure that we would all agree if one of you want to move into the big home, but we do want for you to keep your grandmother's promise to James and Cora. I want to state that every change to her property will require a family meeting." I got up and poured some more of Beck's Best to each person sitting around the table. I sipped a little when I sat back down, then said, "Your grandmother specifically excluded both Scots, but has left an unsealed envelope to each that I was told should be read to all here. The first one is to Scott Sr. Scott. I'm not sure you're still alive because we haven't heard from you for over 7 years. As you'll know if you receive this, I have gone to be with my man. I haven't left you anything except the little shack that sits on a couple of acres on the lake. You used to love to go there, so it's yours. You'll have to claim it and pay the back taxes, because my estate will cease paying the taxes on the land and let it go to a tax sale. You disappointed me terribly, and would have disappointed your great-grandfather as well. I wish you well, and hope that you've learned to be a good person. This second letter is to Scott Jr. Scott Jr., you send me a letter about every other month to let me know you're still living. Thank you for that. From what my attorney has found out, you still have several more years to serve. You will be given the opportunity for parole during your last 5 years. I hope you will be granted your semi-freedom. Please make the most of it. Your aunts and uncles have agreed to provide a job at the dealership for you, so take advantage of the opportunity. Included with this letter is a bank book that contains what remains of your trust money. It is still sizable and will enable you to get a fresh start. Also included is a copy of the letter I have for your father, should he ever show up again. If you want to live in the little house on the lake, it really isn't a shack and could be a place for you. Just use the documents that are in his letter to register the land and keep up on the taxes. I hope you've learned a valuable lesson and will become a good citizen. Love, Julia McKinley. I set the copies of all the documents on the table and told everyone there. Please read everything there and come to me with any questions. Your grandmother had me sit in with the family attorneys to complete her will. Look around and you know that she's probably hovering over us wishing that she could interject one of her wisecracks. We all loved that old lady and wished we could keep her forever. The family read everything that weekend, and we agreed as a group to hire a private detective to track down Scott Sr. What was sad is that my Julia's mother hadn't stayed in touch with her daughter. That deeply hurt her, but the love she received from her Gamma and Happy was enough to keep her happy as a mother and wife. Julia and the aunts decided to go to the state prison to give Scott Jr. his letter. Julia brought the letter, her dad's letter, and pictures of all her children. I heard secondhand that Scott apologized to Julia for the way he acted in college. He even commented that he wasn't deserving of the fame and fortune everyone had told him he would have. He sent a letter telling me how his father and coaches had convinced him that he was a special person and should be treated as such. He said that he looked forward to shaking my hand and apologizing to me. I sure hoped that was a reality. Sophie had Julia, me, and our children over for dinner one night. When all the dishes were cleared and all the adults were sitting back with full tummies, Sophie said, "I'm not sure that I want to rent out the farm again. The Larsons kept it up, but their son scared the shit out of us. Bryce is keeping up with the farm work because you help and we've had the money to improve our equipment, but I think we might want more than what we have." Sophie was uncomfortable with the subject, but continued, "I'm doing what I always wanted to do, and that's to be a good wife and raise my babies." Bryce continues with the farm's goal to raise the grains and sugar cane needed to continue Jeb's heritage. Bryce took the floor now and said, "Not to brag, but I think this last year's batch is one of Grandpa's best, and it is a batch that you and I are totally responsible for. We now have 5 years of Beck's best aging in the caves. I'd like to apply for a federal license to make and sell liquor. I think we could get almost $50 for a 750 milliliter bottle if we bottled 5-year-old Beck's best. That's ridiculously high, but I think it's close to being possible. I don't want to make more volume than we make right now yet. I also don't want to have to make those annual trips to Kansas City and to Nashville with milk cans full of our best. What do you think, Bernie?" I smiled at my sister's husband and said, "I'm for it as long as I still get a little to taste at the house." That broke my sister up. She said, "Mr. Straight and Narrow has found that he likes the special blend that goes into Beck's best." I asked Bryce, "Will this give you that much more income? You guys work hard to make what we sell, and it's always dependent on if we get the right amount of rain for our crops. Is this fair to you?" Bryce said, "We've had enough room to grow a lot more corn, barley, oats, rye, and sugarcane since you bought the Miller place. We sell a lot of our grains and sugar, but we have the raw materials to just about double the production if we were to increase how much we distill. We'll have to buy twice the amount of good oak barrels and find places to store them." I told Bryce, "I'm for trying, and I'll do my best to take time off from work while you're brewing." Bryce said, "See, that's what I'm talking about. I can hire people to do the hard work and continue to do business just like your grandfather did, and wouldn't have to worry about the revenuers if we were legal." Sophie said, "There's a lot of record keeping for the feds, but I think we can do it. We'll have to build a road up to the caves where the best is aging so that it can be bottled, and we'd be in a legal business." Julia added to the conversation by asking, "That still doesn't answer the question of what you're going to do with the old farmhouse." Sophie said, "No, it doesn't, but I've kept the place clean and made sure that the water is flowing properly. We'll have to work with the preacher to find someone deserving to live there. We might even find someone who's willing to work with the liquor as well. It's no different than those big-time whiskey makers in Kentucky. We'll have some good stuff that is known more locally than nationally. James and Cora had us sit down in our main sitting room and brought Gamma's big earthen jug and 4 glasses that night. James said, "Cora and I want to get married by the preacher in Columbia who cared so much for Julia. I think we want to live in the big house for a while, but we'll come back down often." Cora asked, "Do you think we can trade the limousine in for a regular car? It would be cheaper to drive back and forth down here." Julia said, "I'll make sure my aunts make you a free and clear deal for something you like. Go to the dealership and pick out what you'd want. The limousine is in great condition and should be worth a lot in Kansas City or St. Louis. I'll make sure all the taxes and registration for your new car are taken care of." My office now had 2 additional attorneys and 4 more legal secretaries. I asked Hazel, my initial legal secretary, "How did we become so popular that we have to have 4 attorneys and 6 legal secretaries?" Hazel smiled at me as she said, "You need to quit going out to sign up more and more people to represent. You now have all the resorts in Branson and most of them up in the Lake of the Ozarks. We're handling cases in Springfield and just about every community around. We could use another 2 or 3 attorneys and legal secretaries. Even your wife says that we're getting too big. She says that she can barely do all the billing by herself, and it's keeping her from your kids." Well, damn, I didn't realize growth could be a problem. One thing I had learned in law school was to always listen to those around you and immediately confront any problems. This was a problem, so I had a meeting out at the house. It included all the office staff, Julia, and me, of course. I opened the meeting with, "I haven't been paying attention for a while, and our office is producing more than is almost possible. I've just found out we had to farm out a couple of cases that had to be handled in St. Louis, and another one in Kansas City. It's hard to believe we can't handle everything that comes our way with the staff we have. Another problem is that Julia is overwhelmed by trying to continue to do the office billing. I think we're going to have a separate billing center and let Julia become a homebody. We're here to come up with solutions on how to do what needs to be done. You all have legal pads with plenty of pencils, so write your thoughts down so that we can discuss each of them." There was initially no conversation, but it began after about 15 minutes, and everyone was sharing what they were thinking and writing. This was exactly what I wanted to have happen. Hazel made the first general statement. "I think we need additional offices in Springfield, Jefferson City, and up in Columbia. We'll probably have to find at least 2 or 3 attorneys for each site." Julia said, "That would make it easier to bill for each office. I think Bernie should buy the 2 houses next door to our office, tear one down for parking, and use the other as a central billing office. That's going to be a lot of overhead, but I think we'll be in great position to collect what's owed us with the increased business from 2 or 3 new offices. We'll have to find the person who can manage that kind of billing operation." We cussed and discussed what needed to be done until almost 3 in the morning that Friday night and Saturday morning. I had everyone leave all their scratch paper so that I could go over all their musings. Julia and I went to bed and cuddled together as we talked about our future. Julia said, "I think we've had enough children for now. I love our little ones so much, and it means a lot that we created them together, but I think it's time we stop having more. Let's make sure we don't have any more babies." The kids didn't let us sleep in, waking up at their usual time. They always wanted mommy's attention first thing in the morning, so Maria helped change them and laid them with Julia. Sometimes, I would tickle their feet if I was in bed with them, but we found that it would make them pee again, so diapers had to be changed mid-feed. I had to do the diaper change since I caused the problem. Since it was Saturday, Bernie Jr. showed me all the work he had done during the week when he was allowed to be outside by himself. He had weeded 1/3 of the garden, separated the hay bale strings from all our loose hay, and started clearing a path through the forest between our house and Sophie's. He said he would need help cutting down some trees, but he wanted to make the trail wide enough to drive one of the carts between the houses so the kids could play together. BJ and I used Grandpa's cart to go to the old farm and get the 24-inch chainsaw. We worked together to cut down the trees blocking the trail as close to the ground as we could, making it possible to drive right over them. We were almost 3/4 of the way to Sophie's and Bryce's before lunch. The houses were only about 1/4 of a mile apart, so this would be a trail the kids could use often. BJ was determined to finish, and we got the job done that afternoon. We also cut up the brush to create some rabbit dens and saved a couple of large trees to dry out for fireplace wood next year. I was amazed at BJ's planning when we had the trail cleared, because you could look out our kitchen window and see straight down the trail to Sophie's kitchen window. Mothers on either end could watch the kids travel to the other home and not worry about them. I could see that BJ was going to be someone to watch if he could reason and plan that way before age 6. I spent Sunday going over what it would cost to buy the 2 homes next to my office, plus the remodeling required to make one of them a business office. The man who owned the two houses was an old grouch who always thought his property was worth double what the real value was. He had two old oaks that were dying on the property and kept shedding limbs. The tree should have been cut down several years ago, but the grouch was also cheap and didn't want to spend the money. The town condemned the two properties because of the danger of the trees, but old Mr. Hannigan wouldn't reduce his price. This was summer, and our area was subject to some really bad thunderstorms, and we occasionally did suffer some tornadoes. A freak storm came through town a couple of weeks later, uprooting the two big oaks and nearly destroyed the two homes. My building was left alone and didn't even lose any shingles. The property was even worse now because the houses were so badly damaged. I made Hannigan an offer that included the cost of tearing the buildings down. It took the man only overnight to consider the deal, and we closed on the properties in a week. One of our local contractors had been out to begin making estimates and had his men cut up the two trees that had been uprooted. It's so amazing to see the power of tornadoes and how selective they can be. There was an old barn just outside of town that had been destroyed, and those two houses and the barn were the only places where the funnel touched down. The contractor surprised me when he came to me with an offer. He said, "Both houses were built very well and didn't suffer that much damage, Bernie. I've had the men put tarps over the roofs to keep the rain out. You mentioned that you wanted to tear one of the houses down for a parking area. Consider this. The backyards of all three houses are very big, and just the office building parking area handles your current employee and customer parking. I recommend that you repair both houses and rebuild their interiors as office spaces. You could lease the office space out in one of the buildings, and that would offset your purchase price. We'll repair the building you won't need, but leave the interior open so that you can divide it and do a build-out to suit another business. Let me show you the numbers for doing this." What the contractor wanted was less than I had thought it would cost to demolish the houses and build a small office building. Keeping the homes intact will make the three two-story houses appear much friendlier. I sent an attorney to Springfield to survey the other attorneys there and to get a handle on what it would cost for a small office to handle an attorney and secretary. We had agreed on what would be needed, and they were anxious for our firm to spread out. The office staff voted on another attorney going to Columbia and one to Jefferson City to do the same thing. Those three offices would be buzzing very soon if these three attorneys went out to solicit business the way I did in the beginning. All the construction and expansion kept me from going to St. Louis to have the clip job I needed. Julia had scheduled the procedure that she needed to stop her from conceiving, and had it was performed without any problem. She was going to be on restriction for a little over a month, so I made the appointment and had the mostly painless procedure done. The two of us were very loving toward each other because we would soon be able to be wild again and enjoy the great physical love we've always had. The business office opening was a busy time requiring Julia to be at the office hiring and training for a month. Julia found she had a problem at home when she was able to hand the office over to the lady who was going to be in charge. Maria had found a young man who she wanted to marry, but he lived in Arkansas. It wasn't that far if she wanted to commute, but Maria wanted to have babies and be a stay-at-home mom. James and Cora had come here to live for a while and helped out as Julia became the housewife she had wanted to be. The problem was that the office still needed her at least 1 or 2 days a week. The search was on for someone to replace Maria, who the kids, Julia, and I all liked. Cora brought a lady out to the house to meet Julia and the family. She had been a junior high school teacher in Philadelphia, but had been robbed twice and even assaulted in her apartment by a home invader. She was temporarily living in Springfield and considering applying with the school system. Cora found her while shopping in a dress shop in the mall there. They became friendly, and Cora convinced her to come out and see our home and meet the kids. She came on a rainy summer day, so the kids were all inside. I think the first thing that surprised Shauna, Cora's friend, was that none of the kids were watching television. Julie was reading a children's book to Deb and Jeb, who were now almost 3. She would read the page and then read it again while pointing at each of the words, and the two who were still toddlers would repeat the words after Julie read them. BJ and Bill were playing chess on the floor, joking about the mistakes the other was making. Maria was all over Shauna to make her feel comfortable, and then came James and Cora to almost overwhelm Shauna. Julia said she could see that Shauna couldn't believe the kids were so well-behaved when she greeted her. Julia told her, "We've tried to teach them all to enjoy each other. We found out that each having a toy wasn't as good as having one toy, and the 3 learned to share. We would explain to them that having a brother or sister was something special, and it's good to share things instead of one hogging something." I heard James say something to Julie in German. She answered him and said something to BJ. Bill was still learning, but without Gamma now. James turned to Shauna and said, "The children wanted to know if you would take over teaching them now. They really enjoy languages, and the 2 oldest speak, read, and write German well. They are as good with Spanish and have a lot of practice with some of the garden workers." Their great-great-grandmother was also teaching them French when she died, and they want to learn more. Now that Cora and I are visiting for a while, I'll teach them some more French unless you'd like to do that. Julia told me that Shauna took hold of her arm and said, "You must hire me to be the nanny for your children. I do speak French, but only a little German. I'll learn from James as long as he's around and is willing to teach me." "How advanced are the children?" Julia said, "It's my husband's fault. He and his sister are exceptional people and learn at a much faster rate than most people. The kids seem to follow in his ability. Julie is doing high school work now, and BJ isn't that far behind. Bill will be 5 next week and is doing 3rd grade work. As you can see, Julie enjoys teaching the words to the twins. She speaks Spanish to them as well as German, so they are able to understand when Maria forgets and talks to them in her native language." Julia took Shauna around the house to show her where her rooms would be, and then asked, "Do you cook?" "Part of the job is to help with meals, especially lunches for the kids. We often have the sister's kids here for lunch, but she only has 3 and they are mostly older than mine. Those kids will be homeschooled with mine, so this job is a busy one. We'll get another helper if we need one." Although Maria was able to do most everything, she learned along with the children, so it was a good relationship. Shauna turned to Cora. "Can you take me back to Springfield to get my few belongings? I still have most everything in boxes." Cora said, "We'll use Julia's Suburban so that there will be plenty of room. I forgot that you don't have a car and depend on public transportation. Let's go get that done so you can begin to learn how Maria takes care of the house." Julia told me that she asked Maria to find her another girl to help with the family. Julia also told me that she didn't want to act like a spoiled wife, but she wanted to be free to help at the office and to spend even more time with the children. I think her great-grandmother had influenced her a great deal. Maria's wedding was special because we were able to have it at our place. We had plenty of room for all Maria's and her new husband's relatives, and it was while all the families were celebrating that Julia and Shauna found a girl in her late 20s who was very reticent to mingle with most of the others. The girl, Ria, was following Julia and Shauna by the end of the evening. Julie and BJ spoke to her in Spanish a couple of times, which made her feel comfortable. Shauna and Julia set a time to meet Ria at her home on Monday. I was unaware that Shauna and Julia had found someone who was going to be an additional housekeeper, cook, and childcare person. This stranger came to sit across from me when I came home from work and sat with the twins while they told me of their day. Deb said, "This is Ria. She's going to take Maria's place. She is very smart and speaks, reads, and writes English. She told me that she is one of many children in her family, and it is good that she is going to go to work for us." I looked at Jeb as he had the family's male qualities, and he smiled. He softly said, "She's very nice and very soft. She hugs nice." There it was from the male perspective. He didn't care whether or not she was smart, but thought that it was good that she was soft and hugged nice. Bill was the quiet one. He didn't offer an opinion, but smiled at Ria while with his siblings in front of me. Julia came in and sat on my lap, displacing the twins. They were used to that and didn't complain. Julia explained that Ria had been learning from Cora and her all day, and she thought that the young lady would work out well. She did indeed come from a very large family who were all illegally here in the U.S. I was surprised that the children 16 and older who weren't in school were all employed at various labor-intensive jobs. Julia said, "You haven't done any immigration work, but I'll bet that at least 1 or 2 of your attorneys have. I want you to help Ria and her family to become legal. The children like Ria, and I like her too." A new mandate from the mistress. Later, when the children were all in bed and the other adults let Julia and me snuggle on the couch, I told Julia, "You know that Friday is your 30th birthday. If you remember from your grandmother's will, she said that you had a surprise coming later that you would find was more valuable than being a part owner in the car dealership. I can't divulge what it is, since I only know because of executor's privilege. You and I are going out to eat Friday evening so that I can tell you about your surprise." Julia looked at me strangely and said, "What more could Gamma give us? I know your grandfather paid for some of this beautiful home, and I thought that Gamma paid for the bulk of it." I smiled when I told her, "Most of the cost of building this place actually was from my investment account that came from Scott Jr., the same money that paid for the remodeling of the 2 new buildings. We didn't use your trust money because we haven't needed it. I know from handling a lot of the dealership's legal work that your aunts haven't used theirs either. Your family doesn't have to be, but are very frugal considering their wealth." Julia said, "Well, we aren't doing too shabby either. My trusts are worth so much that we may not be able to count that high. We don't use any of it because we haven't had to. Your expansion might stretch you out a little, but that's what the trust is there for. What could Gamma have left me that she considers so important?" Friday is only a couple of days away. I then told Julia, "I'm planning to announce that I want to form a business partnership with the other attorneys. I don't know exactly how to do this, but I want all the attorneys to have the opportunity to be part owners of the firm after working with us for 5 years. Someone is going to stay around if they have stuck with us for that long. I really need to figure out a way to include some of our legal secretaries through a profit-sharing program, even though the law doesn't permit them to be partners with lawyers. Julia said, I'll think about that and see if I get any ideas. The partnership idea is a good one, and it will bond you with the attorneys you send out to the new offices and any new ones you hire. I was teased and tormented by Julia as she tried to weasel more information about the birthday surprise out of me. We made love that night the way we usually do. It's almost like it's something that has to happen before we can relax in each other's arms and sleep. I had an office meeting at 3 in the afternoon the next day. I had made sure none of the personnel had appointments that would overlap into this time. My announcement about creating a partnership stunned the attorneys. I told them, this is important because you will participate in the firm's profits in addition to your hourly fees. I've been spending all the profits on expansion and building, and we might continue to do that, but I want to drive us toward becoming one of the best law firms in Missouri meanwhile. We're attorneys, and I want us to continue as we have since I opened for business. We'll handle the smallest claim as well as the large claims. I want us to be good neighbors and good citizens of the community. You were all brought on board because of your friendliness and down-home qualities. We will now expand as business partners. There will be more announcements in the near future, so let's make this place home. Everyone in the house gave Julia happy birthday hugs and kisses Friday morning. There were a lot of cards from everyone, including Sophie, Bryce, and their kids. I think we always treasured the homemade cards given to us by the kids. I went to the safe deposit box and pulled a large brown envelope out and put the box back. Some shocking information was in the envelope. I had the other papers ready, had filed them with the county clerk, and had labeled them as not for dissemination. The original judge who presided over the will had granted this for Julia McKinley. Julia and I drove to Branson to eat dinner at the exclusive Ozark Men's Club. It really wasn't a men's club, but a wonderful ornate restaurant that served great food and provided intimate dining. I suggested to Julia we both have a drink and were served some Beck's Best from a bottle brought to the table. We sipped our drinks and had some before-dinner appetizers. I pulled an envelope out that had Julia's name on it. I told her, in this envelope is something special that you will know is from your Gamma. Julie opened the envelope with shaking fingers and pulled some papers and a handwritten note out. Julie read it aloud. Julia, you've been a loving granddaughter and have never asked for anything. You've married a man who is your equal and has demonstrated his ability to be successful. You probably don't need all this money, but you can do as I've done and leave it for your children and grandchildren. Use some of this for your aunts if they need assistance with the dealership, but I want you to spoil yourself and your family. It gives me great satisfaction to give my wealth to you. Gamma Julia. My wife's eyes were wet, but she questioningly looked at me. What is this wealth? I took one of the papers out and showed Julia the Swiss bank account with a staggering balance. I then showed her the investment group's activity with most of the money in that account, and it had been growing by 5 to 15% per year for over 50 years. 2 more pieces of paper disclosed the ownership of 2 large plots of land with homes on them that have been kept up for over 40 years. I said, we'll have to take some time and go see these properties. These were your great-grandparents' homes to go play at. They both came from money and used what they had to make even more. You are now ranked in the top 50 of most wealthy Americans, Julia, but no one knows or will ever know unless you tell them. Julia asked, did Gamma ever say why she didn't want me to have this until I was 30? I asked her, and she said that she wanted this to be like dessert after enjoying your trusts. The thing is you never seriously dipped into them, and I had money that we've been happy with. We ate the delicious meal and didn't have much more of Beck's Best. I'd bet that bottle cost us close to $100 at a place like this. Julia said, I want to go home to my palace and be with my family after we had some ice cream for dessert. I want to enjoy every minute I can with them. We're special, Bernie, and can help so many, so we will. We went home in time to play with the kids before bed, and then sat with James, Cora, Shauna, and Rhea. Cora still had the earthen jug and poured us all some of Beck's Best. Cora said, we're having a special dinner to celebrate Julia's birthday tomorrow. Sophie has a cake, and we have saved some good beef for us to enjoy some steaks. We played for a long time enjoying our love that night. Julia even got out the modern-day Kama Sutra for us to experiment some more. The aunts and uncles all came down from Columbia to celebrate Julia's 30th birthday. Julia learned that each of her aunts had been surprised with a gift of a huge amount of money on their 30th birthday. Jill said that she had learned that it was a tradition with the McKinley family. Since grandmother married a close cousin, also a McKinley, the two were able to continue the gifts. Sophie and I were sitting outside, enjoying watching kids play. She said to me, I've always felt guilty that Grandpa gave Bryce and me all his money, Bernie. He had a lot saved up, but it was all in a 5-gallon milk can. Bryce had wanted to sell out and just live like kings, but I told him that he could go find another family if he really felt that way, because I was staying right here to raise our kids. He moped around for a few days wanting to go buy an expensive car and go to the city to buy one of those huge TVs, but we had a good car and a pickup, and we had a TV, but it wasn't 6 foot wide. Our house is almost as big as yours, and Bryce enjoys the fame he has because he's the brewer of Beck's Best. The idiot even snuck into town to fool around with a couple of the comfort girls there. I knew about it, and made sure he scrubbed well before I gave him any. You know that he's been the only man I've ever made love with. Julia tells me you are her only man ever, and I know you too well to think that you've ever been unfaithful to her. We're country bumpkins and proud of it, Bernie. All the money we now have doesn't make life better. We're the ones who make our own lives better. Yeah, I would have married my sister way back when. I went to college, became a lawyer, and found my life made in a bookstore instead. Sophie gave me a hug and kiss that could very quickly have become incestuous. Bryce called our house Monday morning when the world should be getting back to normal and asked me to meet him at the warehouse where we stored the barrels of Beck's Best that was distilled for the first time and stored to be ready for the second distilling. I rode the cart over the path and up to the barn. I could smell it before I stopped the cart. Bryce was standing at the barn door that led to the large storage room. We walked in and saw at least half the barrels had been chopped up by axes lying around the room. Have you called the sheriff, Bryce? Not yet, but can we, since this is liquor? What someone did is against the law. Someone came onto our property and destroyed part of our inventory. I'm sure they didn't know this wasn't the finished product, but whoever did this knows they've hurt our business. Bryce told me to call the sheriff, so I did. The intruders ruined 28 60-gallon barrels of first-process liquor. We had 20 sheriff's cars in the yard along with several vans of equipment from the state to investigate a crime scene in less than half an hour. The sheriff asked me the value of the whiskey that was destroyed. I told him, it's about $300,000 if you figured wholesale at $35 a bottle. This is a major hit for us. We won't be able to make committed deliveries. This will hurt the brand. The state sent more investigators down because of the value of the destruction. I was thankful that we didn't have a tenant in the house, or they might have been injured. I would look for a tenant and want them to be young and robust, able to protect the property and liquor storage. The feds showed up to see how much revenue they would lose. They were incensed when I told them that they would lose taxes on 8,400 bottles of Beck's Best. I was exaggerating because we would lose about 15% of the total volume when we distilled the liquor the second and third time. The loss was still huge. I spent all day with the local, state, and federal law enforcement people. Poor Bryce spent all day with our hired help cleaning up the wrecked barrels. We immediately ordered replacement barrels, plus an additional 50, so we could begin processing another full batch of the liquor. Bryce was determined to meet our commitments by Christmas and was scouring the countryside for the ingredients he would need. We found a lot of corn that was still on the cob, so we bought that, shelled it, ground it, put it in barrels with sugar, yeast, ground barley, and rye, and hoped we could keep the temperature high enough to increase fermentation. Bryce and I would taste the nasty mixture every morning, waiting for the taste to be just right. I would go to work and Bryce would work in his fields. I stayed home the morning we agreed the taste was right for distilling, and the two of us, along with some of the hired men, cooked liquor. Our distilling equipment was some of the best that wouldn't burn the booze because it was cooked by steam from a double boiler. We used all of Granddad's methods, but now on a bigger scale. We were able to begin the second distilling process on the fresh batch by the time all the fermented booze was distilled the first time. That booze that hadn't been damaged had already been distilled the second time and stored. We sold a little of what we considered green booze, but not very much. The green stuff was sold to neighbors who were used to buying moonshine that wasn't anywhere near as good as ours. Bryce had found a good tenant who agreed to guard the farm for a sizable reduction in rent. It helped that we were able to also hire the men of the family to help with crops and movement of the liquor as we processed it. This disaster had some benefits since Bryce and I became very close and learned a lot about what we wanted out of life. The law offices were all doing great. The big city offices, what we called the offices in Jefferson City, Columbia, and Springfield, had each grown to 3 or 4 attorneys. I think that if you were to survey the state, our firm was the largest in the state in terms of the number of offices, and if our bookkeeping was correct, the most profitable per attorney. All of the partners were very happy with their share of the profits, and all showed their success in different ways. The state and federal police cracked the case of who had destroyed our crop. The people involved were a group of mountain folk who made their own brew, but weren't licensed. They felt like our liquor was hurting their business. They became so flagrant in their attempt to sell green liquor that the state and feds caught up with them right away. They all squealed on each other, and the part the others took in trying to kill my business. They admitted that they didn't believe we could recover so fast, in order to continue doing business. Bryce and I knew the difference in that year's inventory. It didn't have the fresh corn and grain taste, or the fresh squeezed sugarcane taste it should. It wasn't bad, but not as good as we usually made. To maintain brand integrity, we labeled it Beck's Not Quite Best and discounted the price, with a note on the label explaining why. We didn't want to lose repeat business by passing off inferior product as Beck's Best. The good part about having to take time off from the law offices was that I was able to spend it with my 3 and Bryce's 2 boys. I was able to teach the boys to hunt and clean the game we killed as the seasons changed and it grew colder. I taught them how to properly place traps, along with the excitement of walking the trap line in the morning to collect any game that we captured. I was able to buy 5 of the .22 rifles that would fire the shorts and single-shot shotguns so that the boys could hunt rabbits and quail. There was a major war with the moms, but I persevered to be able to teach the boys to become men. I think both families became tired of eating rabbit. The boys were taught how to make the women and sisters rabbit skin slippers for Christmas presents, and all was forgiven. I was shocked that the time had gotten by me so fast when we celebrated the twins' 8th birthday the next summer. Julia and I sat out on the front porch swing and just held each other as we reflected on the years we'd been together. Julie said, "I wish we hadn't been so quick to stop our ability to raise more kids. I miss having little ones, and I miss watching them learn to walk, eat, talk, run, and play." The twins were faster than the others in learning to read, but that's because the others enjoyed teaching them. I kissed my wife's forehead and thought of our life to this point in time. We've been decent parents and good examples of what moms and dads should be, Julia. The kids see us, and Sophie and Bryce, and know what adults are supposed to be like. Let's continue to be who we are and to teach our kids. Julia came to me and motioned me toward the empty kitchen table as I was preparing to go into the law offices the next day. "We need to do something with the house in Columbia. My aunts are wondering what to do. I spoke with James and Cora, and they both say that they will be down here for the rest of their lives." A sorority approached me through a realtor to ask if I might consider selling. Considering the value of the property, that might be the best deal we can get. I think that I'm willing to sell the house if no one in the family wants to keep it. I said to Julia, "You know how I loved your Gamma who made me welcome in her home. The place means a lot to me, and I'm sure not nearly as much as it does to you. Tell me what you believe we should do." We sold the property with everyone's blessing the next week. Julia, Cora, James, and all Julia's aunts went to the property to take what they thought they would enjoy having. I even saw Scott Jr., now paroled, who came to go through some of the kitchen stuff to find some things he was fond of. Julia wanted to make a donation to the university in her great-grandmother's name, using the money the estate received for the house. My scholarship hadn't been completely used, and we found out that Julia's scholarship had never been initiated. Julia and I became special alumni right then. The aunts, Scott Jr., and Julia equally split $3.2 million when the property closed. I know Julia deposited hers in her oldest trust account. We didn't have a direction for the money to go to at that time. We ended up using our personal funds to make the donation to the university. Shauna was kept busy teaching my 5 and Sophie's 3. These 8 kids, who spanned from the oldest at 14 going on 15, to the twins at 8, were far ahead in any age group they were compared with. Sophie's oldest wanted to go to college, and was probably mature enough to attend a university, but you can't let your 13-year-old daughter go off to college. All the brain genes came from Sophie, because although Bryce was smart and had great retention, he just didn't have the mental capacity to plan and execute a complex plan. He should be thankful his kids love their daddy so much that they didn't try to bamboozle him with their plans to do childish, nefarious things. Sophie's oldest was enrolled in Mizzou's internet program. Julie's competitiveness roared up, of course, to challenge her cousin until Julie was also enrolled in the same course of study at 12. Rhea was the happy person in the family, because she had met a young man at church who became a regular fixture at the house. He would come for supper and often play a game of chess with one of the twins. Jeb and Deb were near masters at the game, where Sam was a real novice, but he was rapidly learning from the tormenting twins. Julia told me that Sam was attending internet college with Mizzou and doing well. She worried that he wasn't getting enough rest since he was at our house almost every night. Rhea celebrated each of Sam's semester grades as he worked closer to becoming an accountant, while being the stock and weight checker for the local grain elevator. He loved numbers and how everything could be displayed in an orderly manner. His siblings all worked at various jobs in town and in the bigger cities nearby. Sam's folks were farmers making a living from the 160 acres they owned. Sam's dad was a regular buyer of sugar from our sugarcane. He supplemented his crop income with some from his decent liquor, although he sold his green brew almost as fast as he made it. Julia's aunts chose locations on the Ozark Lake properties to build luxurious homes that they called cottages to get away from the high-powered car business. They now had dealerships in the original Columbia, Springfield, Rolla, and Jefferson City, with their newest location in eastern Kansas City. They used the multiple dealerships to shift inventory between them to keep a fresh look in front of the customers. Scott Jr., now paroled, had become somewhat of a recluse on the old lakeside property he and his dad used so often. Julia and I didn't know it, but we had heard Scott Jr. had improved the property until it was now a showplace. Scott became a partner in a State Farm insurance agency and seemed to be cut out for the business. Julia and I were sitting on the porch riding the swing late one night, sipping some of Beck's Best when my love said, "We've lived the American dream in all its glory. We took care of our parents and grandparents, watched after our aunts, your sister, and any of our kin who've had trouble. We even took care of Scott Jr. when he got out of prison in a lot less time than we all thought, and we've now taken care of our kids to the point they may be able to take care of us." I was smiling from all the memories that reminiscing brought up. "Julia, my love, we met at a bookstore and all this is the result of us enjoying being together. I'm thankful that you decided to enjoy being down here and living on the land where my grandfather and Happy began their life." Julia said, "I was determined that we were going to raise our children together and in a home such as we had with your grandpa and have now. I wish that I had more kids now, but 5 is a bunch by today's standards. Come to bed and let's see if we still know how to make one of those wonderful babies we've enjoyed, Bernie." Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.